The voice was that of a young woman, calm, articulate, and impossible to ignore. This wasn't a game. It wasn't a dream, either. Yet her voice echoed clearly inside my head, and the glowing quest window floated right in front of my eyes. Could it be today again? Suppressing a sigh, I opened the information window. Tiring. Daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Press-ups 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Sit-ups 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Squats 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Running 10 kilometers. Incomplete, 0/10. Warning. Failure to complete the daily quest will result in appropriate punishment. The moment I saw the list, I couldn't hold back my frustration. For crying out loud. How many days has it been already? Part 1. Rank E Hunter. Rank E Hunter, Song Jin-woo. No matter where he went, that title followed him like a curse. His overall strength barely surpassed that of an ordinary man. Sure, he was a bit stronger, and his wounds healed a little faster. But in every other way, he was just average. Naturally, that meant he got injured often. Too often. He nearly died more times than he could count. Not that he wanted to be a hunter. The work was dangerous, the pay was terrible, and the mockery from others never stopped. But quitting wasn't an option. The Hunter Association's medical aid was the only reason he could afford his mother's hospital bills. Millions of won every month. Without that, a man in his mid-20s with no other skills would have been hopeless. So he stayed. Not because he was brave, but because he had no choice. Hunters from the same area usually knew each other well. When a gate appeared, they'd all be summoned to handle it together. Those who arrived early sipped coffee and chatted. Hey, Mr. Kim, over here. Oh, Mr. Park? I thought you quit being a hunter. Well, my wife's pregnant with our second. Ha. So you're back for some quick cash? Huh? Nothing beats a raid for that. As they laughed, Park leaned closer. Still, I feel like we're getting called less often these days. Are gates closing faster? Kim shook his head. Nah, the guilds are hogging all the profitable ones. We get the leftovers. Still, an association raid's usually safe. Park nodded but scanned the area nervously. No guild involvement meant low profit and low difficulty. At least, that's what everyone hoped. Then Kim's eyes lit up. He's here. Mr. Song. Over here. Several hunters smiled as Song Jin-woo approached. Hello. Jin-woo greeted politely and walked past them. As soon as he was out of earshot, Kim whispered to Park, grinning. Now we're safe. If he's here, this raid will be easy. What do you mean? Park frowned. Is he strong? Kim chuckled. You don't know? His nickname's humanity's weakest weapon. Weakest? Park blinked. Not strongest. That's Choi Jong-in. Rank S. This kid? Probably the weakest hunter in all of Korea. Then why does everyone look so happy to see him? Because when he's assigned to a raid, it means the gate's low rank. The association doesn't want him dying, so they keep him in safe ones. Park finally relaxed. That makes sense. Kim smirked. There's even a rumor he once got hospitalized from a rank E dungeon. A rank E? Yup. They didn't even bring a healer, because no one thought anyone could get hurt. Both burst into laughter, only to quickly stifle it. Careful, he might hear you. Park glanced at Jin-woo and snickered quietly. Thankfully, he seemed far enough not to notice. But Jin-woo did notice. I can hear every word, you old man. He smiled bitterly and tried to ignore them. He arrived early, so the raid hadn't begun yet. Spotting an association staffer handing out coffee, he walked over. Can I get one too? Oh, sorry, Hunter Song Jin-woo. We just ran out. A cold breeze brushed his face. He rubbed his nose, sighing. Even coffee's gone. What a day. Why do you keep doing this, Mr. Song Jin-woo? I'm sorry. Jin-woo lowered his head as Lee Ju-hui, the healer treating him, pouted in disapproval. I'm not scolding you. I'm just worried. If you keep pushing like this, something awful's going to happen. Jin-woo glanced past her at the others fighting ahead. This dungeon was D rank. Easy for most, impossible for him. Healers knew him well by now. He was the guy who always got hurt. When Ju-hui asked softly, Is there a reason you can't quit being a hunter? He just smiled. It's just a hobby. I'd die of boredom otherwise. Ju Hui puffed her cheeks. Keep this up, and you'll be raiding dungeons in the afterlife. That made him laugh. Where'd you learn to say that? From Mr. Kim, over there. Egga, that old man again. Their light teasing continued until his treatment was done. By then, the raid was wrapping up. Only one monster today. He looked at the dull rank magic crystal in his hand. Worth less than 100,000 won. Barely $80. Risking his life for that. A rank C crystal could fetch 10 million won. But someone like him couldn't dream of that. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Hey, there's another passage here." Everyone rushed over. Sure enough, a hidden tunnel. A dual dungeon. Song, the senior hunter, murmured. Even he looked surprised. The passage stretched deep into darkness. Song conjured a small flame and tossed it in. It flew forward, flickered, and vanished. "Everyone, gather up," he called. 17 hunters circled around. Jin Wu and Ju Hui joined last. "As you all know, a gate won't close until the boss is dead," Song said. "That means the boss is beyond that tunnel." Hunters exchanged wary looks. Normally, we'd report this to the association and wait. But if we do that, someone else will kill the boss and take the reward. Several frowned. The pay from this raid was already meager. Park, thinking of his pregnant wife, clenched his jaw. Song pressed on. "So, do we go in or not? Let's vote. 17 of us, majority rules." Hands began to rise. "I'm in." "Same here." 8 voted to proceed. 8 to retreat. Finally, all eyes turned to the last undecided person, Song Jin Woo. Everything now depended on Song Jin Woo. All eyes were on him. Jin Woo's hand clenched around the dull, rank magic crystal as he glanced to his side. Ju Hui was shaking her head, her worry written all over her face. Truth be told, he was just as anxious. Normally, he avoided unnecessary risks. He didn't have the power, and he certainly wasn't reckless. But then his sister's face flashed in his mind. She'd be entering university soon. I don't even have enough saved for her first semester. At 24, Jin Woo should have been the one in college. Instead, he'd abandoned that dream long ago. He wasn't going to let his sister do the same. Everyone mattered. He wasn't the only one desperate today, but he was the one with the least to lose. He lifted his hand. "I vote to go ahead." A resigned sigh escaped from Ju Hui beside him. Part 2. The Dual Dungeon. The tunnel seemed endless. Up front, Mr. Song led the way, a small flame hovering over his palm to light the narrow path. "We've been walking forever," Kim muttered beside him. "Shouldn't we think about the time it'll take to get back?" "How long's it been?" Kim checked his watch. 40 minutes. Song frowned. "Then we've got maybe 20 before the gate closes. If we don't find the boss soon, we turn back." Kim nodded. "Fair enough." Also, Song added with a smirk, "It's getting dark ahead. Why don't you walk behind me, Mr. Kim?" Kim eyed the flickering flame, sighed, and pulled out his phone. The glow from his screen lit the path far better than Song's magic. Song blinked, then silently reached for his own phone. At the very back of the group walked Jin Woo and Ju Hui, the weakest fighter and the healer with no combat ability. He rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry." Ju Hui looked at him. "For what?" "For dragging you into this. You didn't even want to come." "I'm fine," she said flatly. But her face said otherwise. Jin Woo tilted his head, trying to gauge her expression. "You sure you're fine?" Her eyes snapped toward him. "Of course I'm not. Do you even realize how close you were to dying last time? A few centimeters higher, and that stab wound would have gone straight through your heart. And your arms, your legs, look at you." Her words hit like a barrage. She wasn't wrong. If not for her healing, he would have died long ago. Healers like Ju Hui, especially ones ranked B, were rare and invaluable. Now that I think about it, I really owe her a lot. Over time, they'd run into each other more and more. She'd been there every time he got hurt. "You're injured again? Didn't I tell you this job doesn't suit you? Show me your arm." "No, the other one. The one that's actually broken." At this point, gratitude had long since turned into guilt. When Jin Woo fell silent, looking dejected, Ju Hui softened. Her expression eased, and she gave a faint smile. "You really are sorry?" He nodded. "Yeah, Then buy me dinner sometime. He blinked. Dinner? She grinned, teasing. What, you don't want to? For a second, he was at a loss. The sudden playfulness didn't match the serious healer he was used to. He realized she was barely 20. Replace her robe with a school uniform, and she'd look like any other student. His face warmed at the thought, and she puffed her cheeks. What's that look for? Don't want to treat me? Before he could reply, voices shouted from up ahead. We found it. The boss chamber. They both turned to see a massive stone door blocking the path. Hunters crowded around it, murmuring, Why is there a door? I've never seen a dungeon boss room with a door before. This feels wrong. Their unease was justified, but Mr. Song wasn't the type to hesitate. Are you all planning to turn back after coming this far? He said, resting his hand on the stone. Fine. Do what you want. I'm going in. He was over 60, but still a formidable C rank. If not for his age, he'd be leading a guild by now. His confidence was infectious. I heard dual dungeons can hold hidden treasures, one hunter whispered. Yeah, a small guild once found one and grew rich overnight. If the monsters inside are the same level as before, I'm not letting that old man have all the loot. Soon, everyone's resolve hardened. The same thought pulsed through them all. We can't walk away empty-handed. Jin Wu, too, clenched his fists. I can't go home with just a single E-rank crystal. I need at least one more. Anything. Treasure, crystals, it didn't matter. In dual dungeons, loot was shared equally among all raid members. A good haul could change his life for a while. Zhu Hui saw the determination in his eyes and sighed. That's the face of someone doing this as a hobby, huh? He smirked. Who risks their life for their main job these days? What? Before she could reply, Song pressed his palm against the door. With a heavy rumble, the enormous stone slabs slid open. Hunters rushed inside eagerly. Let's go, Jin Wu said, grabbing Zhu Hui's hand before she could protest. She flushed, but followed close behind. As they entered, torches lining the walls suddenly burst into flame. What the? The lights came on by themselves. Creepy. Something's off about this place. The chamber felt ancient, like a temple buried for centuries. Moss clung to the walls, the air thick and stale. It's huge, someone whispered. Like multiple stadiums huge. But even that didn't feel big enough. Because at the far end, looming above them all, sat a stone statue of a god. Colossal, silent, and terrifying. Oh my God! Jin Wu's breath caught. The thing dwarfed even the Statue of Liberty. Please don't move, he thought. The statue remained still. Relief swept through the group. Spread out, Song ordered. The tension eased, and hunters began exploring. No monsters here. Not even bugs. These statues are incredible, like artwork. Dozens of smaller stone statues line the walls, each holding something different. Swords, instruments, scrolls, torches. It's like a temple, someone murmured. Song's eyes narrowed. No, it is a temple. He stepped forward and froze. Wait, there's a magic formation here. The glowing patterns etched into the floor pulsed faintly under his boots. Before he could study it further, a voice called out. Mr. Song, over here. He turned. One hunter stood before a unique statue. This one had wings and held a stone tablet. Everyone gathered around as Song brushed dust off the slab. Strange runes glimmered faintly across its surface. It's the rune alphabet, he muttered. The laws of the Karudanon Temple. Only magic-type hunters could read runes. His voice grew uneasy as he deciphered the first line aloud. And as Jin Wu listened, he suddenly felt a tug on his arm. He turned to see Zhu Hui, her face pale as death.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support, we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Zhu Hui's complexion was incredibly poor. Song Jin Wu was deeply taken aback by this sight. What's wrong? Are you ill somewhere? Tea there. Over there. Jin Wu's eyes followed Zhu Hui's trembling pointing finger. She was pointing at the giant god statue. More specifically, she was pointing at the god statue's face. Jin Woo could only tilt his head in confusion because it looked pretty much the same as before. Ju Hui stuttered some words out. The eyes of the god statue moved towards us. Just now. Pardon me. V/backslash ISSDN 0V L/B N / for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C. Jin Woo looked again several times, but nothing seemed to have changed. There was no visible change to the god statue. Yeah, I am sure you've made a mistake. However, it seemed like Ju Hui didn't hear him. Her head stayed lowered, and as she held onto Jin Woo's arm, her entire body trembled even harder. Hang on a sec here. Even Jin Woo picked up on this strange but ominous sensation now. The world was eerily quiet. So much so it felt just too bizarre. No sounds. Even the sounds of the flames burning on the torches could not be heard anymore. First law. In the meantime, Song's voice continued on as he read the contents of the slate. Worship the god. Second law. Exalt the god. Third law. Prove your piety. Those who do not keep to these laws shall not leave this place alive. It was then. Slam. Everyone was jolted back to their senses at the sudden explosion of noise. What was that? Where did that sudden noise come from? The first person to notice the change in the situation was none other than Jin Woo. Because his senses were running at full tilt already, he could tell where the noise was coming from right away. The door. The door is closed. As soon as Jin Woo shouted out, everyone shifted their gazes towards the doorway. The door they left open was now firmly shut close. God D***M in it. I can't stand this. The hunter who was the first to oppose the idea of continued exploration of the dungeon began spitting out cusses as he took large strides towards the door. I'm going home, so you all can have fun with the boss or treasures or whatever. That hunter glared at Song with an expression that contained all of his dissatisfaction before he spun his head around and angrily grabbed the door handle. It happened then. Song's eyes grew extra large. No. Splash. The area above the hunter's neck suddenly vanished. The headless body powerlessly collapsed to the ground. Kyachk. Yua. Yuak. Hunters began screaming their heads off. The stone statue that smashed a human's head apart with a steel mace returned to its original spot next to the door, as if nothing important had happened, its body completely covered in fresh blood. That thing can move. What the hell? Does that mean every statue in here can move, too? We gotta fight against these things. I couldn't even see that D***MN thing swing the mace, so how can I? Unlike others here, though, Jin Woo knew the truth. Their troubles only had just begun. Didn't Ju Hui say it earlier? If what she said is true, a chill rapidly ran down his spine. Jin Woo forced his stiff neck to turn around so he could look behind him. ***T. The stone statue of the god was looking down at him. Part 3. Commencement of the attack. It was then the god statue's two black eyes changed to red. Was this the instincts of a hunter? No, the instincts of a living being were sending out urgent warning signals. Something was coming. Something none of them could contend with. Jin Woo turned towards the other hunters and cried out as loudly as he could. Get down! Almost at the same time, red beams of light shot out from the eyes of the god statue. Jin Woo hugged Ju Hui and threw their bodies to the floor. Buzz! The beam shot right by the spot Jin Woo had been standing. 1/10 of a second. No, he survived by 1/100th of a second. That was definitely too close for comfort. Unfortunately, not everyone was as lucky as Jin Woo. You walk. You ahahak. Those who were swallowed up by the red light evaporated where they stood. Only the ashes of what used to be human hunters remained where the beam flew past. The screams came not from the dead hunters, but those who witnessed their final moments from the sidelines. Actually, what the F***CK was that? How? How can such a thing even be? The remaining hunters began freaking out. Out of the 17 hunters, only 11 survived. Not one of them had ever experienced such a powerful attack before in their lives. I barely made it because he told me to get down. If it wasn't for Mr. Song's shouts. Hunters stared at Jin Woo while nervously swallowing their saliva. Jin Woo turned out to be their unlikely savior. Without his timely warning, They could only imagine what would have happened to them, and that thought sent chills down their spines. While still lying prostrate on the ground, Jinwoo glared at the god statue. Its eyes were still glowing in red, but did not attack again. Is the attack over? Jinwoo looked underneath him. The scared silly Lee Ju-hui was trembling in his arms. This was the reason why she worked for the association and not for a big guild, and participated in simple raids like this one, even though she was nominally an excellent hunter with a rank as high as B. Ju-hui's breathing was getting rougher by the second. He couldn't let her be like this. He had to do something. Jinwoo was about to raise his body up, thinking that he got to do something here, but then someone grabbed his shoulders and pushed him back down hard. Don't get up. It was Mr. Song, somehow next to the youth before anyone had noticed it. Jinwoo was flustered, but still did as he was told. Song then shouted at the other hunters. Nobody move. Stay exactly where you are. Song looked around before focusing on Jinwoo. Only those that moved got killed. Those who listened to you and got down survived. It seems that way. Song tilted his head slightly. I thought you warned us because you figured something out? No. Well, I just felt something dangerous was coming, so... A flash of light brushed past Song's eyes just then. His instincts are pretty good. In other words, he's a ranky hunter? If only his abilities were a bit higher. Just as Song stared at Jinwoo with a rueful expression, Jinwoo too found a little bit of leeway to check out the older hunter's condition. And the youth's eyes opened up wider after finding something pretty terrible. Hey, Ajusi, your arm. This is nothing. I can still hold on. But still. Jinwoo swallowed down his saliva. Song's other hand, that wasn't pressing down on Jinwoo's shoulder, his left arm, was gone. Song studied Ju-hui's conditions for a bit, before he took off the t-shirt he was wearing, and while not even showing the enormous amount of pain he must be feeling, he wrapped up what was left of his left arm. Help me tie up the end, please. It's difficult to sew with only one hand. Jinwoo could only nod his head then. They were able to somehow stop the bleeding for now. Rather than a scream or a pained moan, Song let out a long sigh. It was a sigh containing 10 years' worth of experience as a hunter. Phew! Now that the first aid was over, Song's gaze became a level sharper as he studied his surroundings. Although the god statue stopped attacking them, their situation hadn't improved in the slightest. And like so, seconds continued to tick by. Sob. Just why do we have to suffer like this? A few hunters even began shedding tears now. We can't stay like this forever. The patience of the other hunters was running out as well. Jinwoo agreed with that sentiment, though. Right, we can't stay here forever. But what could he possibly do here? If Song's suspicion was correct, then the moment they moved, they'd get attacked. And even if they got lucky and managed to evade the beams and reach the door, there were the two stone statues guarding the doorway to worry about as well. They were a big problem too. Actually, the movements of the doorkeepers were so fast that he couldn't see it with his eyes. Could he or anyone else open the door and escape before those statues attacked them? It sounded completely impossible, which meant that the annihilation of the hunters was just a matter of time. Wait, a matter of time? When his thoughts arrived there, a strong sense of disharmony filled him up. An event that couldn't have happened, but it happened anyway. But no one else seemed to have picked up on it yet. We missed something here. Without a doubt, the answer to their salvation hid in that something. Don't move, Song shouted at Mr. Ju, who was at the far end of the group. Shut up. Who knows when that thing will start attacking us again. But you wanted to stay here and wait. Mr. Ju was a close combat type hunter. These types of hunters possessed far superior physical abilities than regular human beings. On top of this, Ju was about to sign up with a big guild after his skills were acknowledged by them not too long ago as well. He'll not die here today. While keeping low to the ground, Ju put all his strength down to his legs. His aim was at the doorway. The muscles on his legs were swelling up fast. The**M in it. Song could only mutter out to himself. Right then, Ju kicked the ground and exploded forward. Meanwhile, Jinwoo hurriedly turned his head to look at the god statue. Just as he suspected, the eyes of the statue were fixed on the back of Mr. Ju. And then the chilling red ray shot out from those eyes. Buzz! The beam slammed on the back of Mr. Jew. Kaihak! The female hunter screamed at the top of her lungs. She must have developed a leak, because a puddle of yellow liquid formed where she was squatting on the ground. The expressions of the hunters froze hard. Oh my God! Mr. Jew no longer stood where the red beam flew past. Only the pair of ownerless ankles could be seen now. One of the men, with a weaker constitution, began emptying the contents of his stomach. Be blurred. Jin Woo's expression also crumpled as well. As expected, the god statue could easily finish them off if it felt like it. It'd be easier than stepping on squirming bugs. Actually, if that's the case, then why hadn't it? It could kill them, yet it hadn't done that. This was a completely different pattern of behavior compared to the monsters that attacked as soon as spotting human hunters in their vicinity. These statues only moved if certain conditions were met. The doorkeepers that only attacked if someone approached the door. The eyes of the god statue firing that red beam if someone moved. It was like a game with a set regulation. Hang on, could there be some kind of rules in this chamber? It was here that a piece of puzzle found its place in Jin Woo's head. He began recalling the contents of the Stone Slate song, was reading not too long ago. That was why. The laws of the Karutanon Temple. Was it? Regulation was rules, and rules could be laws as well. The key to their safe escape from this camber had to be buried within those warnings found on the stone slate. Worship the god. That was the first law. Did you just say something? Song shifted his gaze back to Jin Woo. Instead of a reply, Jin Woo simply placed his index finger on his lips. It was a sign asking for a bit of time to think. If my thoughts are right. Jin Woo slowly rose up. Song hurriedly tried to stop the youth, but Jin Woo shook his head while carrying a determined expression. Doesn't look like he gave up on living. Song nodded his head. Jin Woo kept his eyes trained squarely at the god statue and carefully stood up. Almost right away, the eyes of the statue were fixed on Jin Woo, and as expected, the red beam was fired in his direction. If he got down to the ground a moment slower, it'd be his face melting away instead of a few strands of hair on top of his head. Lying face down on the ground, Jin Woo breathed in and out quite heavily. Heek, 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 heek. He nearly died just then. The moment the statue's eyes met his, he thought he was going to die for sure. He somehow did dodge it, but his legs wouldn't stop shaking from the fear. Still, he learned something important just now. It's not attacking someone who's moving around. As long as he was squatting low to the ground, he could go anywhere he wanted to, and the statue's eyes would remain still. However, if one stood up, then the red beam would be fired without hesitation. The D*MN thing only attacks if we breach a certain height. That was why Jin Woo bet his life on proving this theory right just now. And now he was sure of it. The meaning behind the first law, that was the 3 laws. Jin Woo shouted out towards the rest of the hunters. Everyone, their attention shifted towards him in an instant. Jin Woo spoke as he met their gazes. You must kowtow towards the god statue. Hunters began tilting their heads after hearing him. Kowtow. You want us to kowtow to that statue? Hunters exchanged glances with each other before loudly cussing out at Jin Woo. F*CKU. What bullsh** T are you spewing here? What the hell? How can you say something like that under the current circumstances? Have you lost your mind? Song Jin Woo. Kim's face became boiling red as he began snorting like a bull. I had no idea you, Mr. Song, would be like this. If I could move, then I'd have punched you in the face already. Jin Woo bit on his lower lip. 6 of their comrades were killed by the god statue. So, it was rather obvious that the surviving hunters would cuss him out when he told them to kowtow towards that abominable thing. It wasn't hard to understand what these hunters were feeling at the moment. And the most important thing was he had no logical evidence to back his theory up. He only had his gut feelings. Indeed, that was the only way to describe it. However, "They'll do as you say." That voice came from Jin Woo's back. Everyone's eyes immediately shifted there. It was Mr. Song, effectively the leader of this group. Mr. Song, Juicy, you're going to kowtow to that F***king statue? Just as other hunters began to freak out, Song looked straight at Jin Woo. Young man, you've discovered something, haven't you? Jin Woo resolutely nodded his head. Is it your instinct again? Yes, for the time being. I see. Just now, 11 people survived thanks to Jin Woo's instincts. Well, with the death of Mr. Ju, there were 10 now, but still if it was Jin Woo's instincts, then wouldn't it be worth believing it at least once more? That's what Song thought. When Song knelt down and kowtowed towards the god statue, the mood had become solemn and silent. He's really doing it. Seizing upon this opportunity, Jin Woo shouted out once more. Everyone, I beg of you, please kneel before the god statue. We might be able to get out of here alive. Might live. Might be able to get out alive. The impact those simple words carried was quite explosive. We might live. We can get out of here. With just one kowtow. The hesitant hunters began to plop down to the ground, as if they were really kowtowing. The number of them performing the act gradually increased. In the end, even the complaining Kim bowed his head towards the statue. However, there was no visible change to the god statue. Indeed, those chilling red light still shone from the eyes of the statue. Jin Woo felt his heart go cold. Was I wrong? It was here that his gaze shifted to Ju Hui next to him. No matter how generous one was, it was difficult to describe her posture of squatting on the ground shivering, while holding her head in her hands as her kowtowing. What if? Jin Woo carefully grasped Ju Hui's wrist. She raised her head like a scared cat. Seeing her, Jin Woo wordlessly nodded his head. Only then did she relax her muscles somewhat. With that, Jin Woo was able to slowly change her posture. Done. There was only one person remaining now, and that would be him. Jin Woo knelt down towards the god statue, placed his hands on the ground, and slowly lowered his head. Finally, something began to change. Hunters who had noticed the change first raised their voices. The god statue. Look at the statue. Its eyes. The red light buzzing in its eyes was gradually weakening. What the hell? Is this really going to work? Eventually, the red light completely vanished. Oh! Hunters began rejoicing loudly. The red light is gone. We made it. The excited hunters began standing up one at a time. Even then, the statue didn't fire the red beam. Jin Woo belatedly raised his head and spat out a sigh of relief. Phew! Just as he suspected, this chamber operated strictly within the set regulations. If that's the case, then this game was far from over. 2 more laws still remained. The second law, exalt the god, and the third law, prove one's piety. It was then, rumble. Accompanied by a goosebump-inducing noise, the entire chamber began to shake. Jin Woo's expression hardened immediately. As I thought, his suspicions proved to be correct once more. Things were only getting started. The humongous god statue was slowly rising up from the stone throne. Hunters were hugging each other while shedding tears of joy until then. But when they realized this turn of events, they all froze up like statues themselves. What? What the hell? It wasn't over yet. This can't be. None of them could articulate what they wanted to say. Despair rapidly dyed their expressions. Soon, the god statue completely stood up from the throne. The creature swept its gaze around once and began walking towards the hunters. Thud! Every time the god statue stepped on the ground, the whole world seemed to shake. It was so tall that its head was almost scraping against the chamber's indescribably high ceiling. Even when the hunters were overwhelmed by the statue's sheer size, the thing was gradually closing its distance to them. Mr. Song Jin Woo, what do we do? The hunters who were cussing at Jin Woo only a short while ago hurriedly began crowding around him. Is there a way out of this? Say something. All these adults were forming tearful expressions as if they'd start breaking down in sobs and wails very soon. Currently, Jin Woo was their only hope. Jin Woo helped the frozen stiff Ju Hui up from the ground and began talking about the second law. Exalt the god. That's the key. Wait, isn't that? Kim suddenly butted in as if he knew something others didn't. Isn't that what's written on the slate? Correct. Worship the god. Exalt the god. And finally, prove your piety. We need to satisfy all 3 laws. Jin Woo began speaking faster and faster. Why? The god statue was already a stone's throw away from them. Everyone's complexion paled as the gigantic shadow loomed over them. Let me try something. A young male hunter, who usually kept to himself, suddenly took a step forward. What are you trying to do? I've been in a church choir. Am confident if it's about exalting something. The young hunter slowly stepped forward towards the statue while disregarding the dissuasion of Kim. He regulated his breathing while looking up at the god statue before he took a large gulp of air. I come to you, Lord. His clear voice began reverberating within the chamber. Renew my faith once more. Bless me with your grace, Lord. The statue stopped its march in front of the singing hunter. Hunters began gasping out in elation. The god statue didn't move from the spot as if it was absorbed by the singing. All the other noises in the room vanished. Only the young man's voice could be heard in the chamber's interior. The young hunter was encouraged by this and carried on. All the weakness found in me, through your love, I shall overcome. Among the hunters, only Jin Woo was shuddering from this ominous sensation filling him up. This is wrong. Jin Woo swallowed up his words several times. The chamber featured its own set of rules. But the young hunter was exalting the god statue with the rule of Christianity, not with the rules of this chamber. Thankfully, the statue wasn't moving, but could singing that hymn qualify as upholding the rules? Jin Woo shook his head. The only reason why he didn't say anything was solely because he couldn't think of a better way to stop the god statue himself. It was right then. The weighty noise reverberated throughout the chamber. Kikiak! The female hunter screamed at the top of her lungs. When the stone statue lifted its leg up, bloody mess of what used to be the young hunter could be found on the ground as well as on the bottom of its foot. Other hunters began screaming in panic and shock, too. Ah! You walk. The face of the statue, emotionless until then, was now crumpled in pure rage. It's angry. Run away. Hunters dispersed away from the statue in a hurry. Unfortunately for the female hunter, she lost her reasoning and stood on the spot while screaming loudly after personally witnessing the death of the young male hunter. Kaich, D***M. Jin Woo was running away while carrying Ju Hui in his arms, but he turned around so he could go and help that woman out. But then, Song stopped the youth. But Ajusi, it's too late. As if slapping a fly down, the god statue slammed its palm down at the female hunter. Slam! Cook! Jin Woo inadvertently shifted his gaze away. It was a truly gruesome sight, and he couldn't bear to watch it unfold. There is no time to waste like this. Are you planning to let this girl die, too? Song's words sobered Jin Woo up in an instant. It was as he said. You walk. Thud. Thud. Help me. The statue was not walking around anymore. No, it was actually running around and stepping on the humans it found nearby. Whenever the thing stepped on the ground, the entire chamber shook around hard. Thud. Thud. Jin Woo gritted his teeth and began running again. Ju Hui squeezed her eyes shut and held on to him for her dear life. Let's split up. Yes. Thinking that moving around together was dangerous, Jin Woo and Song ran in separate directions. Jin Woo made sure to run towards the furthest corner from the frenzied god statue. However, there was another hunter who had arrived there before he did. It was Mr. Park. Park was running with everything he had. Tears formed on the edges of his eyes when he recalled his family. Sob. Back home, a son who resembled him so much and a wife pregnant with their second child was waiting for him. He couldn't die here, not like this. Perhaps because he ran with everything he had, he was able to run the furthest away from the statue out of everyone here. Pant, pant. As Park tried to control his heavy breathing in the corner, his friend Kim urgently shouted at him. Mr. Park? Park raised his head after hearing the familiar voice. Yeah? Kim pointed at the spot behind Park and cried out. You're back. Look behind you. It was then something sharp gleamed coldly behind Mr. Park. Slice. Park was sliced in half from the top of his head right down to his groin. His cleanly cut two halves fell to the ground. Park. The stone statue that killed Park with its great sword returned to its position as if nothing had happened, exactly like how the doorkeeper did before. Kim began tearing up after witnessing this scene. You sons of asterisk cheese. Behind him, the humongous god statue was stepping on and killing humans one at a time, and if you ran toward the corner in order to avoid it, then the stone statues located there would start attacking you. You. My arm! My arm! The interior of the chamber swiftly fell into chaos. Heek. Cold sweat dripped down from Jin Woo's forehead. His legs were getting heavier. His breathing was getting rougher and rougher. However, his head was filled with only one chain of thought. Exalt the god. Exalt the god. Exalt the god. The words of the second law circulated in his brain nonstop. The key to unraveling this mystery definitely existed within this chamber. Something within this chamber that they could use. However, when the hunters first entered this place, they had searched every nook and cranny, but didn't find a single contraption nor things that might be some kind of tools. No, back then or now, the only things here that can move are the stone statues. A thought raced past Jin Woo's brain just then. Only things moving in here are the statues. ***. Jin Woo's eyes widened. Why haven't I thought of that before? If the only things that could move were the stone statues, then the only thing he could use had to be them, too. These statues activated when humans got near them, meaning he had to take advantage of this rule. What if, even though he was running short of breath, Jin Woo roared out loud enough to shake the entire chamber, run towards the statues holding musical instruments? All the hunters still alive heard Jin Woo's voice. Instruments? A ray of hope found its way into the eyes of the hunters. Quite different aback when he told them to kowtow, everyone moved unbelievably quickly. If Jin Woo was wrong about this, then as soon as arriving near one, they would be killed by the stone statues holding the musical instruments. However, no one here questioned Jin Woo's words. Song was the first one to arrive in front of a statue carrying a musical instrument. Song controlled his heavy breathing and raised his head to look at the statue. And as if it was a lie, the fingers of the statue moved and strummed on the harp. Cling, clang. A beautiful melody flowed out. It's working. Hurry to the statues with instruments. Hunters ran towards the nearest correct statues in hurried footsteps. The statue with a trumpet began blowing it triumphantly. One with a flute began playing with it. The one holding the lyre strummed on its strings. Heek. While sensing the approach of his physical limit, Kim somehow arrived in front of the statue that held a bazooka and plopped down to the ground. TL. I don't know what this bazooka could be. TL'd, as is from the raw. ED. Probably either a bazooka or a bazooki, both from the 1900s. Tiring, tring. As soon as the statue began playing the instrument, the god statue stopped chasing after Kim. He must have been overcome with emotions, because Kim then began shedding tears while he stayed down on his knees. Sob. Meanwhile, the god statue turned around. The creature searched around and soon enough found its next prey. God ***. Jin Woo spat out a cuss as his gaze met the god statues. He then began running hard, so hard that his heart might explode. His back was already soaked through in sweat. Why? Why isn't it working? Jin Woo's resentful glare landed on the stone statue in front of him. The statue holding a drum showed no signs of moving at all. Thud. The god statue closed in with frightening speed. He was practically on the other side of the chamber from the ***** thing, yet the distance between the two shortened in no time at all. Jin Woo swallowed down his saliva. Could it be that the statue won't play because there are two people here? Me and Miss Ju-Hui? He couldn't think of anything else. Why? Because other statues were playing music just fine as soon a hunter stood in front of it. There's no time to think anymore. Jin Woo put Ju-Hui down and got ready to run to somewhere else. Mr. Jin Woo. Still terrified out of her mind, Ju-Hui clung onto Jin Woo's sleeve. Jin Woo calmly whispered in her ear, "We'll both die if we stay together." Tears began forming on Ju-Hui's eyes. Her fingers trembled as they held onto his clothes. Unfortunately, there was no time to explain to her in detail. Jin Woo carefully pried her hand away and began running in the opposite direction as hard as he could. Boom, boom, boom. When he glanced back, the statue behind Ju-Hui began beating its drum in a slow but steady rhythm. What a relief. There was only one thing remaining now, to run to the other statue without getting killed. Only Jinwoo hadn't received the protection of the music-playing statues. Quite obviously, the rage of the god statue was solely directed to Jinwoo and him alone. Jinwoo did his best to avoid the foot of the thing that rivaled a building in size and crossed the room in a hurry. Thud! Thud! He fell and rolled around, but still he somehow managed to avoid getting flattened by the god statue's foot. Heek heek! He might only have been a rank E, but he was still a close combat type hunter, so his physique came in handy in situations like this. Just a little bit further. A bit more. Jinwoo kept an eye out on the god statue's movements and ran even harder. His speed increased, and when the distance remaining between him and the stone statue was mere a dozen feet. No, that's the wrong one. Mr. Song cried out to him. Jinwoo had been paying attention to the god statue only. He was stunned by the shout and hurriedly turned his head to take a look at his front. It's not a statue with an instrument. He belatedly realized that the thing that looked like a musical instrument from afar was actually a shield instead. And sure enough, the statue mercilessly stabbed down with its shield. Heek! Jinwoo hurriedly threw himself to the side. Kayak! Ju-Hui screamed. Jinwoo rolled on the ground, and when he came to a stop, he raised his head to see the god statue standing right in front of his nose. It's one thing after another. His forehead must have been torn from him rolling on the ground because blood was flowing down and blurred his vision. His view was restricted, and he couldn't look too far away. Jinwoo quickly searched around his vicinity. An instrument. An instrument. However, no matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see a single statue holding an instrument nearby. Meanwhile, the god statue raised its leg over Jinwoo's position. Jinwoo threw himself again and somehow avoided the foot of the statue again. But he had reached his limit. A powerful dizziness was assaulting him, and for some reason, he couldn't even balance himself. Please, if there was a real god, he thought that he'd start praying right about now. It was then Jinwoo spotted a stone statue that held neither a weapon or a musical instrument. Is that? Jinwoo decided to bet everything on that statue. He crawled on the ground and arrived in front of the statue in question. He then managed to flip his body around and lie down on the ground so he could see the god statue. He no longer had any energy to move. Pant, pant. Jinwoo stared at the approaching god statue and continued to roughly breathe in and out. The expression of the god statue was far more contorted compared to before, as if it got infuriated further by Jinwoo's continued evasion. The god statue now stopped in front of Jinwoo. Seeing a creature as big as a high-rise blocking his entire view, Jinwoo felt like he couldn't breathe anymore. Pant, pant. Did it think he was nothing more than a cornered rat? The god statue simply looked down at him and didn't do anything else. This is the end. Jinwoo sensed his own unavoidable death approaching closer after looking straight into the eyes of the god statue. However, Wu to V// SSN 0 V L/B I N / for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C. From somewhere behind him, a beautiful and otherworldly voice came out. Jinwoo turned his head around to see what was going on. Woo 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 woo. The lips of the stone statue holding a book moved, and whenever they did, a divine song flowed out and filled the interior of the massive chamber. Woo 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 woo. The crumpled expression of the god statue slowly reverted back to the emotionless state. Soon, all those horrifyingly contorted facial muscles of the statue smoothed out. When the song of the stone statues came to its eventual end, the god statue turned around. Then, just how other stone statues had done until now, it returned to its throne and settled down as if things that happened until now were nothing but a lie. The noise of the god statue sitting down on the throne resounded throughout the chamber. Pant, pant, barely made it. A thin smile formed on Jinwoo's lips. Meanwhile, Ju-Hui began running from her position at the far end of the chamber. Mr. Jinwoo. She ran with all her might and knelt down next to him as tears streamed down on her face. What can I do? What am I supposed to? She summoned all of her magical energy and activated her healing magic. However, nothing seemed to improve. The dispersed hunters gathered around Jinwoo one by one. Every single one of them carried a dark expression. What, Mr. Jinwoo? Even then, only Ju Hui was crying in sorrow. Why was everyone acting like this? Jinwoo's lips bobbled up and down. He wanted to ask what was going on, but he couldn't really summon forth his own voice. Sensing that he had no choice, he tried to prop himself up. Then, he noticed the pool of blood around his lower torso. Only then did he belatedly realize the change to his body. Below his right knee was gone. Jinwoo's eyes reflexively shifted toward the stone statue holding the shield. He then saw the trail of blood clearly visible on the end of the shield, and the rest of his right leg was just below that. Drip, drip. Drops of blood started falling from Ju Hu's nose. That was the sign of her reaching the limits of her physical stamina. The healing magic from a rank B healer was unable to recover missing limbs. Meaning, what she was doing was basically pouring water into a broken jug. Her stamina rapidly bottomed out in the end. It's fine now, Miss Ju Hui. You can stop. I'm going to heal you. It'll fix you as good as new. Hunters stared at the two of them while forming miserable expressions. Out of the 17 who initially entered this chamber, only 6 remain now. And from this group of 6, 2 of them had suffered horrible, grievous wounds. Song had lost his arm, while Jinwoo lost his leg. They might have survived, but none of them felt like rejoicing at the moment. It was then, yet another strange noise rocked the chamber. Rumble. The middle of the temple, where that strange magic formation could be found, suddenly rose up above the ground. Jinwoo inwardly thought that it had finally come. Prove your piety, is it? He already had a rough idea as to what those words could mean. Part 5. Final Trial. The circular magic formation in the center of the temple began rising up noisily and only stopped after reaching the height of a couple of steps. An altar. Hunters displayed alert reactions as soon as Jinwoo muttered out, "An altar?" He just said it's an altar. The person who had rescued them from the 2 preceding crises was not some high-ranked hunter, but rank E Jinwoo, who used to be the butt of their jokes most of the time. If it weren't for Mr. Song, all of us would have been. Hunters were thinking this exact same thought. Under the current circumstances, Jinwoo's words were their lifeline. And now, that Jinwoo had muttered out a word, altar. Kim always was quick on the uptake, and so he caught on to the meaning first before anyone else had the chance to do so. I get it now. I see how it is. Kim then unsheathed the sword hanging on his hips. Now, originally, this weapon would be used to cut various monsters down. But for now, it'd have to be utilized for a different purpose altogether. Even if I'm a dumb B***starred, I can more or less get what you're trying to say here. Hunters nervously swallowed their saliva while looking at the sharp, coldly gleaming blade. Why, Mr. Kim? Why are you pulling your sword out like that? Why don't we talk about this first? Let's talk first. The highest-ranked member among the group, Rank C Hunter Song, was heavily injured, meaning there was no one here that could potentially stop Kim, who boasted a pretty powerful set of skills himself, even within the D rank. Kim pointed towards the altar with his sword. The final law, prove your piety. And there's an altar appearing out of nowhere in the middle of this place. Kim's gaze then shifted to Jinwoo. So, aren't we supposed to offer up a sacrifice, Mr. Song? Jinwoo slowly nodded his head. That was what the youth thought as well. One of the surviving 6 had to act as a sacrifice. That's what the last law probably meant. Jinwoo came to this conclusion. He sensed more disturbance and raised his head, and realized that the eyes of Mr. Kim, as he approached closer, did not look friendly at all. A long sweat drop glided down Jinwoo's forehead. Ah, juicy what? You young man, don't say anything and be still. Kim angrily shouted out and pointed his sword at Mr. Song, who was squatting next to Jinwoo in order to check out the youth's condition. Just who was it that dragged us to this place? Wasn't it this guy? Yes, it was Mr. Song. So, don't you think it's only right for Mr. Song to take the ultimate responsibility? Ah, juicy. Jinwoo tried to get up in a fit of anger, but then Song's hand that resembled the bark of an aged tree stopped the youth. Jinwoo looked at Song in disbelief. Song wordlessly shook his head. His eyes were pleading with Jinwoo. asking the youth to not say anything else. Of course, Jinwoo had lots of things to say, but he kept them down for now. Song slowly raised his body up. What Mr. Kim said is right. I should take the blame for today. Old man, I guess we are now finally on the same page. Kim used the tip of his sword to point towards the altar. If you get it now, then let's get going already. Over 10 people died here because of you, old man. One of the dead hunters today happened to be Mr. Park, a personal friend to Mr. Kim. Exploring the dual dungeon was decided with a vote involving everyone, but Kim had already erased that memory off his head after losing much of his reasoning. Mr. Song spoke to Kim. I'd like to walk on my own volition, so can you put the sword away? Of course, Kim refused right away. How can I trust you, old man? Stop wasting time and start moving already. Song sighed softly under his breath and walked towards the altar. Kim pointed his sword at the older man's back and followed on afterwards. Jinwoo bit his lower lip while watching the two men walk away. This isn't the fault of Mr. Song. More than half of the group agreed to do it together. Just because things had gone south, blaming Song for everything was simply too cowardly, he thought. But Jinwoo unfortunately did not possess enough strength to stop Kim here. Kim, thought to be one of the best among the rank D, and Song Jinwoo, easily the worst of the rank E. The difference in their strengths was all too clear for him to see. Not only that, Jinwoo had even lost a leg. If he tried to confront Kim as he was now, there was a chance that him, and even Ju Hui, who had been focusing solely on healing him, could meet with disaster. *M in it. Jinwoo squeezed his eyes shut. He never hated his own powerlessness as much as he did today. In the meantime, Song had stepped up on the raised altar. Suddenly, a red flame lit up near the outer perimeter of the altar as soon as he did. Everyone nervously swallowed their saliva and observed the unfolding situation carefully. However, nothing else happened. Just a single flame came to life, and that was it. They waited for a while, but there was no visible change at all. Not only Kim, but everyone else got flustered by this situation. Kim quickly turned his head and spoke to Jinwoo. Look here, Mr. Song. This wasn't it? Jinwoo also shook his head. Even he too thought that once a person chosen as the sacrifice stepped up on the altar, the third law of prove one's piety would be completed. It's not about offering up a sacrifice. If so, then it was not necessarily bad news. If the law was not about sacrifices, then it meant Mr. Song could still saved. Jinwoo's expression brightened somewhat. He sweated bucket loads as he tried to stand up, and two hunters nearby quickly lent their assistance. Please take me closer to the altar so I can study it. Mr. Jinwoo, your injuries are. Ju Hui also got up from her spot to follow after Jinwoo. Her complexion was rather pale after expending too much of her magical energy. But because she had worked so hard, Jinwoo's blood loss had been temporarily halted, and the pain he felt was reduced to a barely noticeable degree. I gotta hurry up. The current condition of Ju Hui, Kim's boiling rage, Song's injuries, and the frightened hunters, he didn't have a lot of time here. Jinwoo eventually arrived at the altar with the help from other hunters. Let's climb up on the altar. The two hunters flinched from his statement, but they trusted Jinwoo and stepped up. Then, 3 more flames lit up. Right away, Jinwoo's eyes gleamed brightly. It's the same number as the people on the altar. Mr. Song and Jinwoo, plus 2 others who helped the youth indeed. The flames lit up to match the number of people standing on the altar. And it kind of looked like that these 4 flames were drawing a circle outside the altar. If I take into consideration the space between the flames, 2 more will complete the circle. It seemed that all the remaining people had to climb up on the altar for something, anything to get started. Jinwoo turned his head to ask Song, if we wait here, do you think other hunters will come and rescue us? Song shook his head. Today is the 7th day since the gate showed up. These things will start moving first before the help arrives. Because it's a gate rank D, I see that it's been left alone for far too long. Well, that's how the association operates, isn't it? A gate would open up fully after the 7th day. The real meaning of a raid was to kill the dungeon's boss monster and therefore close the gate before that happened. When failing to do so, The monsters trapped in the dungeons would be set free from the dungeon, and they would be able to roam the outside world. Jinwoo looked behind him. The giant god statue was still looking down on them with an overbearing, arrogant expression from its throne. If that thing manages to go outside, then the ensuing chaos would be unimaginable. Of course, before that happened, hunters coming to this chamber to rescue them would all be killed by the statues first. He was now sure of the fact that they could not wait here forever. Jinwoo called out to Ju Hui and Kim. "Both of you, climb up." Ju Hui stepped up on the altar first. The hesitant Kim also followed suit soon afterwards. 2 more flames lit up, and the circle was now complete. And then, hunters were grandly stunned by what happened next. What the hell? What's going on here? As Jinwoo had suspected, yet another change took place. It's coming. From the outermost edge of the altar, small blue flames floated upwards and began drawing a circle of their own as well. There looked to be at least 30 of these blue flames, placed real tightly next to each other. 34, 35, 36. Jinwoo quickly counted them all as the blue flames completed the circle, and he realized that there were 36 of them. The 6 red flames that lit up to match the number of people, and the 36 blue flames that appeared outside them. What could be the significance behind that number? It was then, clang! Without a warning, the resolutely shut door suddenly opened up wide. Hunters reflexively flinched. Yuck! They all wanted so bad to run towards the wide-open doorway. But having seen the final moments of the choir boy Hunter, they found it hard to take the first step. If one tried to be the first, just who knew what might happen to them? Everyone's gaze fixed on Jinwoo, as if to demand an answer from him. However, Jinwoo's lips remained tightly shut. He couldn't come up with a guess at the moment. He didn't know whether the open door was a trap, or they were now allowed to go out after they upheld the final law successfully. Too bad for him. Just as everyone was looking at Jinwoo, a horrifying noise filled up the entire chamber. Creak! Creak! The heads of all 6 hunters quickly snapped around to look. What was that? It's coming closer. Those D*MN things are all moving now. Hunters' breathing quickened in an instant. The stone statues that had only moved when a person got near were now several steps closer to the group. Jinwoo only needed a short moment to figure out what happened, of course. No, the statues didn't move. It's the plinths below them that moved. That horrifying screech from earlier on most likely came from the plinths beneath the statues grating against the stone floor. They're not moving anymore? Kim wiped the droplets of sweat on his forehead as he spoke. While everyone was still staring at the statues, Jinwoo's focus was on the blue flames. They had been going out one by one, and 3 of them had flickered out of existence already. Creak! Hearing that screech, someone cried out. Well, what was that? Where did it come from? Jinwoo quickly raised his head. The noise had come from his general direction. The stone statues facing him had moved a little bit closer. Why only my side? Was it because he looked at somewhere else briefly? In order to confirm, Jinwoo closed his eyes. The noise resounded out again. Kriak. As soon as he opened his eyes, the noise stopped. What the F***CK is going on here? What were we supposed to do about this? Jinwoo quickly shouted at others. Don't take your eyes off the statues, no matter what. When he thought about it, he realized that the statues first began moving closer to the group when others were busy looking at him. They creep closer when we are not looking at them. It was right then another blue flame disappeared. However, there was still no discernible change to either the group or the statues. Could it be? Cautiously raising his arm, Jinwoo did his best not to take his eyes off the statues while checking the time with his wristwatch. As I thought, at an interval of 1 minute, a blue flame was being extinguished. The blue flames are the timer. It was quite likely that one of the main points of the 3rd law was to stay within the altar until all 36 blue flames died out. In other words, as long as everyone was keeping close watch on the statues, they'd be safe. It was quite possible that no one had to die at this final huddle. Wanting to be more accurate about the remaining time, Jinwoo began recounting the number of blue flames once more. There are 30 remaining. They only needed to endure 30 more minutes. Unfortunately, Jinwoo made a huge mistake just then. While he was counting the number of blue flames, his eyes wandered away for a brief moment, and that resulted in the statues creeping closer. "Kreekak, you Yuawa!" The man standing on the opposite side screamed and ran towards the door. He simply couldn't hold on any longer as the horrifying screeching noise coming from his back frightened him so much. As soon as he left the altar, one of the red flames disappeared. "No!" Jinwoo cried out urgently. However, the man running as if he had gone crazy escaped through the open doorway without meeting a grisly fate, which took everyone by surprise. What the hell? "Mr. Song, what's going on? That guy made it out alive," Kim shouted out, flustered. Jinwoo was standing with his back to the doorway, so he couldn't really tell what was going on. Did something change? The door. The door has closed just a little. The door's closing? No. After that guy left, the door moved a little bit but then stopped. Jinwoo then recalled one of the red flames disappearing as soon as that man left the altar. God d****. He immediately felt his heart go cold. One of the questions that he couldn't quite figure out until now as he stood on top of this altar finally had an answer. How could standing on an altar be a proof of one's piety? Indeed, he now had the answer to this quandary. And that answer was probably the worst one for Jinwoo, who had only one leg now and needed others' help just to keep his balance. That open doorway was a trap, a false hope right in front of one's eyes. If people saw the open door and climbed off the altar at the same time, the red flames would have gone out and the doorway would be closed shut again. And then, the banquet of raining blood and screams would inevitably follow next. On the other hand, the altar was the proverbial promised land. If each one did what they had to do in their positions until the timer ran out, then their survival would be guaranteed. So, it was between the false hope right in front of one's eyes or the unseen promise of salvation. The third law was a test to see if one could defend one's position without falling into the sweet temptation over yonder while constantly being under the encroaching threat of death. However, two flies in the ointment happened in this situation. The first one was Jinwoo. Originally, the remaining group of people would have ran straight for the open door, but they stopped first to listen to what Jinwoo had to say, and that helped them avoid the trap being sprung in the first place. We got lucky there. Indeed, that had to be the only explanation. Such a thing was only possible because Jinwoo managed to figure out the first two laws all by himself and earned the trust of others. Unfortunately for him, the second fly also happened something he didn't foresee. A deserter had appeared among their midst. How would human beings react when there was a hope of survival right in front of their eyes? It was way too obvious. The man helping Jinwoo up abandoned the youth and bolted as well. Song hurriedly reached out and propped Jinwoo up from his back. Poof! When that man left the altar, yet another red flame disappeared, and as expected, the door closed a little bit more. Creak. Kim dazedly pointed at the second deserter. But just like the first person to abandon them, he too safely escaped past the doorway. Jinwoo confirmed the number of remaining red flames and shouted out, "We must not move. Any more than this, then it'll be the end. RA/CH/P/TERS on N/V//LB IC//M." Front, back, left, and right, in order to secure all four directions, for people were the bare minimum required. Jinwoo himself, Ju Hui, Mr. Song, and finally, Mr. Kim. A single person leaving now would result in a gap within the field of vision. Kim wiped the sweat off his forehead and asked urgently, Mr. Song, just what is going on here? Explain it to me properly. Well, make it as long as we wait here. Only until all the blue flames are extinguished. Jinwoo spat out everything he had to do so far. Kim nodded his head as his ears perked up. Jinwoo quickly ended his explanation and added one more thing at the end. Remember, everyone here can get out of here alive. The laws of this chamber always left open a path for one's survival. The final law would not deviate from that. Jinwoo was certain of no one else needing to die as long as the remaining people trusted each other. Too bad. Kim's thoughts were quite different from the youth's. The older hunter asked hesitantly, Look here, Mr. Song, you could be right on this one, but could the door close shut instead when the timer runs out? Jinwoo couldn't answer that one. He came to his conclusion after considering several variables, but until the result was in, he couldn't be 100% certain of anything. However, what Kim wanted was a definite assurance. Rather than an uncertain promise of everyone's survival, the definite survival of his own self had proved to be far more alluring in the end. I'm sorry about this, but I don't think I can stay here anymore. Juicy. Sorry. With that parting word, Kim stepped down from the altar. He then ignored Jinwoo's urgent calling and ran towards the door. He stopped and looked for a brief moment just outside the door, but Kim did not step back inside the chamber again. Grit. Jinwoo gritted his teeth. God D****. He had saved the lives of others, but what he got in return was definitely not something like gratefulness or friendship. His entire body shuddered from the pain of betrayal. Just as he suspected, as soon as Kim had abandoned them, a gap within the surveillance had been created. It was impossible for 3 people to guard all 4 directions. And so, the statues positioned in the blind spots began creeping closer to the altar. Kriikik, Krihak. The encirclement of the stone statue was gradually tightening. Song took a look around and then spoke to Jinwoo and Juhui. Both of you should leave now. His voice was full of resignation. Jinwoo looked at the old man. But Juicy, just as Kim had said, I was the one who dragged us all in here. If someone has to remain behind, then it'd be only right that I'm the one. But still, you two with a better future ahead of you should be the ones to survive today. Song began smiling then. He was thinking of these 2 young people's hearts as they would have to abandon him here. Jinwoo helplessly nodded his head. He was uncomfortable about this whole thing, but there was no time left to argue back and forth who should remain in here. Song then tried to ask Juhui to take care of Jinwoo. Miss Juhui, can you help out Mr. Song here for a bit? Why, yes. However, just as she was about to prop him up, Juhui plopped down to the floor. Juhui tried to get up, but then tears began forming around the edges of her eyes. My legs, I can't move my legs. Both the expressions of Jinwoo and Mr. Song hardened in an instant. Juhu's current physical condition did look terrible even from a casual glance. Her lips were in the shade of pale blue, while her entire body continued to tremble ever so imperceptibly. She was suffering from the side effects of overusing her magic energy when she was already at her physical limit. V/////ISST and 0V L/B N / for the B/S novel reading expiry /N/C because she tried to heal my leg. Jinwoo felt his chest tighten and couldn't say anything. However, they really didn't have any time left now. Kriik. The stone statues were relentlessly approaching them without a moment of rest, even now. Jinwoo shoved Song's hand away and plopped down to the ground himself. Seeing this, Song's eyes grew wider. Why, young man? Jinwoo spoke up with a determined expression on his face. Juicy, please take Juhui and get out of this place. I told you, they'll be the ones staying behind. In that case, who's going to help Juhui? It was pretty much impossible for him to take Juhui, who couldn't even stand properly, and leave through the door within the time limit. Of course, there was the other choice of abandoning Juhui behind as well. However, Juhui had saved his life several times already, and the only reason why she was in this state was because she tried to help him with all her might. He definitely did not want to suffer the guilty conscience of abandoning such a person behind in this godforsaken place. There is no time left. Please leave now. Song's expression remained hardened as he helped Ju-hui up. She shook her head desperately while tears streamed down on her face. No, you can't. Mr. Jin-woo can still survive, you know? Let me. I promised to buy you a dinner, didn't I? Jin-woo pulled out the rank magic crystal from his pocket and placed it in her hand. Please, use this and enjoy one on me. When I get out of here, they'll be coming around to collect the change, you see. A smile formed on Jin-woo's face, prompting Ju-hui to cry out in anger. How can you crack a joke in this situation, Mr. Jin-woo? It was at this moment that Jin-woo signaled to Mr. Song with a nod. The older man then lightly chopped on the back of Ju-hui's neck. With that, Ju-hui lost her consciousness. Song picked up the unconscious girl and placed her over his shoulder. But I'm really sorry about this. This is my choice, so it's fine. Mr. Song bowed his head to Jin-woo. With that goodbye, Song quickly left the altar. Krihak, Kriiik. During the time the three of them were chatting, the statues had arrived at the proverbial stone's throw away. Jin-woo got on his knees and took several deep breaths. Full woo. He spotted the sword Kim had left behind next to him. So, he reached out and picked it up. Now that it had come down to this, they'll take at least one down with me. When he looked behind him, Jin-woo saw Mr. Song safely leaving through the doorway with unconscious Ju-hui still perched upon his shoulder. What a relief that was. Only he'll die here now. He wasn't doing this because of some noble determination to sacrifice himself or anything like that. No, there certainly was an element of him calculating the best possible outcome in his decision. Even if he survived and got out of here today, he would have to live as a cripple for the rest of his life. Obviously, carrying on as a hunter would be impossible then, and it was also questionable whether he'd be able to live normally as well. He was only a high school graduate, and since he didn't have any discernible job skills, he simply didn't have too many options left to put food on the table. Mom's hospital fees and my sister's school fees, too. If that were the case, then he might as well make sure his family would receive a better compensation from the association, even if it was just a single cent more. Was the compensation paid out to the family members 300 million won or 400 when one dies during a raid? TL, between $267,000 and $356,000. That was a huge amount for a worthless life of a ranky hunter. Creak, clang. Finally, the statues arrived. The first one to arrive climbed up on the altar. Jin-woo glared at it and lifted the sword up. Come. Unfortunately, the expected attack didn't come from the front, but his back. Stab. A long spear penetrated into Jin-woo's back and exited out of his chest. Kiak. Jin-woo spat out a mouthful of blood. An unimaginable amount of pain rushed in like a tsunami wave. If you were stabbed a couple of inches higher, you'd have a hole in your heart by now. Ju-hu's nagging he heard only a few hours ago slipped past his mind like a scene from a revolving lantern. You will walk. The stone statue lifted up the spear. Jin-woo was lifted up along into the air, still pierced through by that spear. He only got to struggle for a brief moment, though, because the statue slammed him down on the altar. Slam! Sounds of bones breaking could be heard from all corners of his body. He shrunk away from the intense pain. You. As he began trembling, the stone statues slowly surrounded him. They formed an encirclement around him. Jin-woo raised his head and glared at them, his entire being shuddering nonstop. I don't want to die like this. Now that he was facing his final moments, tears pooled on his eyes. He recalled the faces of his family. He even recalled the face of Ju-hui, her face full of anxiety and worry for his safety. I don't want to die. He didn't want to end his short 24 years of life in this place. Step. The stone statue, wielding a sword, took a step closer without a hint of emotion. Then, it raised its sword up high. Even though he was shaking hard, Jinwoo did not avert his gaze away from this be asterisk starred. Finally, the statue's sword slashed down. Swish. Only if I had one more chance. Jinwoo's eyes shot open wider. It happened then. SFX for the statue's movements suddenly stopping. As if someone had pressed the pause button, the scarily fast, moving sword suddenly stopped in midair. No, that wasn't actually correct. It hadn't stopped at all. It simply had slowed down so much that he ended up thinking that way. 1 millimeter in 1 minute? It was very slow, but the sword was still definitely coming down. What's going on here? Jinwoo couldn't hide his astonishment. It was then a voice of a female he had never heard of before resounded within his head. Completion requirements for the secret quest. The courage of the powerless has been met. Secret quest? Completion requirements were met. Jinwoo couldn't understand any of that. No, hang on a minute. Besides all that, where did that voice come from? Too bad for him. The voice ignored Jinwoo's questions and continued on regardless. You have acquired the rights to become a player. Will you accept? He had acquired a right? Accept what exactly? Sounds like he'll be given something. He grew up dirt poor since his childhood, so he had never refused freebies until now. However, that was a story for when he was still alive. What use was there for free stuff when he was dead? When Jinwoo hesitated and didn't answer, the voice in his head asked again as if to urge him on. There is not enough time left for you to make your decision. Your heart will cease functioning precisely 0.02 seconds after you refuse to accept. Will you accept? He couldn't tell whether he was hallucinating or not, but he still got to figure out that he was only a moment away from dying for good. He finally spotted countless other weapons headed in his direction, beside that D*MN sword. That was how. Now that the things had devolved to such a degree, he might as well. If you're giving it to me, then just give it to me already. There was no need to utter anything out at all. He simply thought about it in his head. Even then, the voice of the female replied to him immediately. Congratulations on becoming a player. Flash. A blinding light suddenly wrapped around Jinwoo's body and, at the same time, he lost his consciousness. Part 6. Penalty. He opened his eyes. He saw a white ceiling, and his nose stung from the odor of disinfectants. He also felt the sensation of a hard mattress against his back. Jinwoo immediately recognized where he was. A hospital? Ever since he met the rank B healer, Ju Hui, the frequency of him staying in one had decreased somewhat. But still, hospitals were familiar places for Jinwoo, just as he'd be with a local convenience store. So much so that he even heard a rumor of there being a special seat reserved for himself at the Hunter's Hospital, too. Jinwoo raised his upper torso up. He then placed his hand on his chest and felt the vibrations coming from there. His heart was beating without a problem. I survived. It wasn't only that, though. Unlike before, his entire being felt light and airy. He'd be feeling heavy-headed and fatigued whenever he woke up from a hospital bed. But it was a different story now. No, it was as if he had woken up in his own bed after a night of a good rest. What's going on? This shouldn't have been possible when he thought back to the moments before he lost his consciousness. A sword was falling on his head right before his eyes. Even if he got lucky and the sword missed, he was still surrounded by countless scary enemies. Those D*MN things were strong enough to give the assault team, formed solely from the Rank A, no, Rank S hunters, a genuinely hard time. But I came out of that situation alive. Was he dreaming things then? Fortunately, there was a good way of confirming it for himself. Jinwoo pulled away the blanket covering him. If that situation had been real, then his leg would still be gone, and if he had been dreaming, then his leg would be. You've finally woken up. Jean Wu was surprised by the weighty voice coming from the corner of the hospital room and hurriedly turned his head to look. I apologize if we took you by surprise. Unfortunately, we are unable to wait any longer. Two men kitted out in black business suits approached Jean Wu's bed. The youth tilted his head and asked them, "Who are you?" He had never seen these two's faces before. One of them, with the close-cropped hair, like a soldier and wearing a pair of sunglasses, presented him with a business card. "This is who we are." Jean Wu received the business card and read what was written on it. Wu Jinxiol, the section chief of the Monitoring Division, the Korean Hunters Association. The Monitoring Division was the only department in the Hunters Association with many strong hunters in their payroll. Well, since this department was tasked with managing the country's hunters, so, quite obviously, they would employ many high-class hunters to facilitate that purpose. What does the Monitoring Division want from me? Wu Jinxiol dragged a chair closer to the bed and sat down. The other man, who must have been his subordinate, stood behind him. The unspoken pressure emanating from the two buff guys staring down in close vicinity was quite heavy. The story they conveyed was rather surprising, though. I was unconscious for 4 days. By any chance, do you remember what happened before you blacked out? Yes, I do. Please tell us everything you can remember. Jean Wu told them everything truthfully, minus the strange hallucinatory words he heard before he lost his consciousness. "And that's when you lost your consciousness, is that all?" "Yes. I opened my eyes next, and am in a hospital." Wu Jinxiol and his lackey exchanged meaningful glances. For some reason, they seemed to be troubled by Jean Wu's lack of knowledge. Actually, Jean Wu was the one who wanted to find out what happened the most in this room. Just how did I get to this hospital? Did a large guild participate and kill those D*MN things? Well, actually, Wu Jinxiol awkwardly opened his mouth. By the time the agents of the Monitoring Division and the White Tiger Guild arrived at the scene after being briefed by the survivors. The White Tiger Guild was a supermassive guild and also one of the top 5 in the country. The association had recognized the danger. Hence, they requested the aid of such a huge guild as the White Tiger Guild in the first place. Just what had happened back there? Jean Wu nervously swallowed a dry spit. By the time, everything was gone. The only thing to be found within that open space was you, Mr. Song Jean Wu. There was not one trace of the god statue, nor the stone statues. Come again. Jean Wu displayed a shocked, disbelieving face. It's hard for us to believe it as well. If there had been any inconsistencies in the testimonies of the survivors, or if we had failed to find the remains of the victims in the chamber, we might have suspected something fishy was going on. Wu Jinxiol scratched his chin. It had been 6 years since he got ranked as an A and started working for the Monitoring Division. He could confidently say that he had witnessed and experienced pretty much everything during his tenure. However, this kind of situation was a first even for him. He had asked other guilds as well as the associations in other countries, but the end result was nothing worthy to speak about. That was why. So this is what we've been thinking. Wu Jinxiol carefully opened his mouth. There were powerful creatures in that chamber, without a doubt, but they were taken care of by an unknown group or an unknown person, because no otherworldly beings escaped from the gate before it was closed. You see, they had to consider all the possibilities. Even if the odds were low, they had to confirm them all. The head honchos of the association deliberated and then deliberated for some more, and finally came up with a theory. Wu Jinxiol carefully studied Jean Wu's reactions as he continued on. We suspect that Hunter Song Jean Wu Nim might have gone through another awakening. Another awakening. Jean Wu's eyes shot open wide. Although extremely rare, there had been instances of a human who had awakened his or her abilities as a hunter going through yet another awakening, often referred to as reawakening. Those who undergo this process would normally become extremely powerful compared to before. Originally, once a hunter's rank was assigned at the beginning, it rarely changed. A hunter's abilities were determined the moment one went through an awakening. That was why. However, it was a different story for those going through the reawakening process, jumping past their own limitations to rise up from, say, rank C to A, or even from B to S. Such things had happened before. Wu Jinxiol nervously swallowed his saliva. Song Jin-woo. If he went through a reawakening and became a rank S, no, maybe even exceeding that, then it's possible for him to kill those monsters all by himself at RA/LATS/CH/P/TERS on N/V//LB C//M. The god statue was said to have melted rank C hunters with nothing but its eyes, according to the survivors. If one were able to kill such a creature even while unconscious, just how powerful one could possibly be. To prepare for this unlikeliest possibility, Wu Jinxiol labeled this incident as top secret and made sure everyone involved would keep their mouths shut. This was also the reason why Song Jin-woo found himself in a hospital room all alone, as well as being looked after by some of the finest medical practitioners in the nation. Wu Jinxiol's chest began beating real fast. Could Korea finally have a hunter on the level of an international powerhouse? There were less than 10 people in the entire world that could truly be described as a global powerhouse. But what if Korea were to possess a powerhouse that was said to rival a nuclear warhead in terms of pure firepower? Of course, confirming the truth of the reawakening wasn't difficult at all. Didn't the wise elders once say to make hay while the sun still shines? Wu Jinxiol signaled to his lackey. Bring it here. Then, the lackey went to the corner of the room and began rummaging through a briefcase placed there. That is, before Jin-woo could finish his question, Wu Jinxiol explained first. It's the device to measure your magic energy. He added that, although this device had been miniaturized, its efficiency or accuracy did not fall short of the actual full-size measuring device located in the Hunters Association. All you have to do is to place your hand on this magic crystal over here. On top of a circular plate, there was a fist-sized magic crystal embedded in the middle. Its color was pitch black, as if it was a black hole that wanted to suck him in. It was one of the highest quality magic crystals that cost as much as 1 billion won, not to mention that could only be found in monsters ranked A or higher. TL, almost $900,000. When Jin-woo stared at the magic crystal without saying anything, Wu Jinxiol formed a dignified, serious expression and spoke up. This is a necessary step during our investigation, so please cooperate with us. Jin-woo nodded his head. If he indeed had undergone a reawakening, then his life would do a 180 in an instant, and they were going to test it out for him for free. So who was he to refuse? Jin-woo placed his hand on top of the black crystal, and soon enough, warm rays of light oozed out from it. Cold sweat drops formed on the foreheads of Wu Jinxiol and his lackey. SFX for a beam of light dissipating. Not too long after then, the light surrounding the crystal dissipated. Wu Jinxiol hurriedly took off his sunglasses and confirmed the numbers. Right away, a small earthquake rocked Wu Jinxiol's eyes. How can this be? He rechecked the numbers, but it remained the same. How could a person holding a hunter license possess the magic energy value of only 10? When considering the fact that the lowest average value for rank E, the bottom rank, was around 70 to 100, Song Jin-woo was no different from a regular person. Is it really a reawakening? If it is, what could be my new rank now? Jin Woo's hands were soaked in the sweat of anticipation. Seeing the suspicious reactions of the two monitoring division agents, the result must have been somewhat beyond their expectations. Meanwhile, Wu Jinxiol was comparing the existing data on Jin Woo with a new measurement. His first measurement returned the value of 12. For years later, it's 10. It has decreased by 2, but it is within the margin of error. In other words, the magic energy measuring device was working fine. Instead, it was Song Jin Woo's magic energy that happened to be just illogically, nonsensically low. It was a miracle that he had survived until now. Wu Jinxiol rapidly realized that being here was a waste of time, so he got up from his seat. Let's go. Yes, sir. Wu Jinxiol and his lackey quickly packed up to leave. Excuse me. Can you tell me what is? Just as Jin Woo was about to ask, Wu Jinxiol bowed his head slightly. Thank you for your cooperation. If you remember anything else, please give us a call anytime. As if their rear ends were on fire, two men in black rapidly left the room as soon as they put away the device. The hospital room, that felt rather small, suddenly became quiet and lonely. Jin Woo scratched the back of his neck. I guess that was a no then. Well, if he thought about it, besides him feeling refreshed, there didn't seem to be any change to him at all. Even if he did go through a reawakening, it'd still be difficult for him to kill all those statue B asterisk stars, anyways. Maybe you might have a chance against them if you were either the ultimate weapon, Hunter Choi Jong-in, or the rank SS Hunter Go Gunhui. Of course, him speculating like this was meaningless, since he had never seen them in action before. There was always a thick veil of secrecy draped over the hunters ranked S. They were more like clouds in the sky to him. Actually, he thought up to here and inadvertently raised his head up. And that's when he saw it. He looked up without thinking, and then saw words floating in the air. You have several unread messages. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The words remained floating up there without a single change. He shook his head hard a few times and even rubbed his eyes, but they were still there. Jin Woo massaged his aching forehead and lowered his head. It hadn't been a long time since I started hearing weird things, but now I'm even seeing them, too. Could something in his head really be broken? There was a condition called PTSD, after all. People who experienced a huge accident or a traumatic event usually suffered from this condition. It was only a few days ago since he witnessed the deaths of many of his comrades. Not to mention he himself nearly died as well. So it would not be so strange to hear or see weird things as a possible side effect. However, there were a couple of things that prevented him from dismissing this out of hand. Jin Woo's sight, lowered to his leg, the leg that got cut in half by the shield of the stone statue, was now all fine and dandy. The voice he heard out of the blue inside the underground temple hidden within the depths of the dual dungeon, his completely cured leg, and now those words floating in front of his eyes. Too many weird things were happening all at once. What if there was a chance that all these things were not isolated events, but linked to one another? When his thoughts arrived here, his aching head felt just a bit clearer. Okay, fine. Jin Woo slowly raised his head. Once the confusion in his heart died down and he felt calmer, he became quite curious about the contents of those so-called unread messages. There might be answers to his questions found within those messages, after all. In order to confirm the messages, he reached out towards the words, and his hand simply went past them. It's not touch-operated? It seemed that he got way too used to how a smartphone worked. He couldn't think of any other way to access the messages other than tapping on the icon, though. While he was deliberating on the means to access the messages, he recalled the memories from the moments before he blacked out. Right? That happened. Back then, he could only get his intentions across to that unknown voice by talking to it. Just like back then, I should either form the words in my head or speak it out loud. Thinking that this must be the case, Jin Woo then began to mutter the potential combination of words one by one. Confirm. Messages. Confirm messages. Check messages. Reading. I want to read. I want to look. Hey, show me already, will ya? It was then. Just what is it that you wish to see that bad? He felt a cold, probing stare coming from the side, so he turned his head to look. and spotted his little sister in her school uniform looking at him from the gap of the half-open door. Jin Woo became speechless. Her appa, busy glaring at the ceiling while demanding someone to show something to him, he simply didn't know how to explain this one to her. Maybe you hurt your head really bad? The younger sister stood at a distance away and asked Jin Woo, prompting him to shake his head vigorously. No, that's not it. Even though he denied it, Jin Woo's younger sibling, Sung Jinh's eyes remained suspicious. Are you really okay? Yes, I'm telling you the truth. Gina blankly swept her gaze all over Jin Woo before she came closer while her breathing became uneven, angry. And then, as soon as Jin Woo assumed a defensive posture, she began punching him in all the unguarded parts. I told you to stop getting hurt. You have any idea how worried I was? I'm sorry. Other people walk away fine, but how come it's only you who gets hurt all the time? Sorry. The strength behind Jinh's punches gradually seeped away. She soon stopped, and as her head fell, began crying. Jin Woo slowly patted the back of his sobbing sister. His own nostrils stung quite a bit then. I was thinking of leaving behind this kid alone and dying, wasn't I? What a relief that he made it out alive. When he looked back, there had been way too many brushes with death for comfort back then. It was as if he had experienced one hell of a terrifying nightmare. Jin Woo's gaze shifted ever so slightly towards the words floating in the air. You have several unread messages. It still feels like I haven't completely woken up from that nightmare just yet, doesn't it? There were so many things he couldn't understand. But so what? The most important thing was that he came back alive, and he got to see his little sister again. Sniff. Thankfully, his strong-willed sister stopped crying after a short while. Unfortunately for him, though, her nagging continued on for over 1 hour afterwards. Do you hear me? If you get hurt one more time, I'm going to give up on studying, find a job, and make sure you don't work as a hunter ever again. Jinh's sharp glare didn't really suit her pretty face, but that was a biological trait she had shared with her older brother. Okay, I hear you. Jin Woo nodded his head as if had given up. Only after she was able to extract his assurance several times more did she display a hint of satisfaction and stood up from the seat. You going somewhere? Yeah, to school. I got permission to leave so I could check up on you. So I gotta go back. Jin Woo nodded his head. Right, the university entrance exams are next year. She might never have received a private tutoring, nor did she ever attend extra classes, but she always got ranked within the top 10 in her school until now. Gina dreamed of becoming a doctor. Only until a few years ago, she just loved to waste time on video games and stuff like that. But then, after their mother fell ill, she swore to become a doctor and never stopped studying since. Jin Woo dearly wished to make her dream come true, no matter what. Hang on a minute. Playing video games? Suddenly, Jin Woo's eyes gleamed a bit dangerously. Okay, I'm going now. Just as Gina was leaving his room, Jin Woo urgently called out to her. Hey, Gina. Yeah? When you're playing video games. Gina smirked softly. I don't play games anymore. The third year of high school is only a few days away, you know? I know. There's something I want to ask you, though. Oh, really? Like? I didn't know Appa played video games, though. Gina suddenly displayed an intense interest as a subject she was deeply intimate with once upon a time was brought up. Jin Woo sneaked a glance at the still-floating message in the air and asked her th. Most uptod slash it vels a slash republished on n0 velbgen c/o/m. When there are unread messages in a game, what should I do to access them? You gotta open the mailbox first. I gotta open the mailbox. Tearing. As soon as Jin Woo said the word open, a clear beep entered his head and the hidden messages revealed themselves. There are 2 unread messages. Congratulations on becoming a player. Unread. Daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Is now available. Unread. Jin Woo smiled brightly. Finally, seeing her older brother's complexion suddenly brighten like that, Gina felt something was wrong and quickly asked him, What's up? What game is it? You need my help? Jin Woo firmly shook his head. Nope, no need. He'll do it alone. How would his younger sibling react if he told her what had been happening to him right now? I really don't want to be labeled as a loon by her. Jean Wu swallowed back the things he wanted to say for the time being. While pretending to see her out, Jean Wu confirmed her getting on the elevator and quickly returned to his room. I can't repeat the same mistake again. Click. To prevent eyewitnesses intruding on him, he even locked the door. Finishing with his preparations, Jean Wu sat on the bed and read the titles of the messages available to read. He thought that the first message sounded familiar, as if he heard it before from somewhere. Where have I heard it from? I know I have. So the first message, then? Confirm. This system will support the growth of the player. Failing to comply with the system's instructions will result in potential penalties. Your rewards have been delivered. He belatedly remembered this. He heard those words just before he lost his consciousness. Back then, it was talking about a player this and that, no? Of course, back then, or even now, he still couldn't really understand what on earth was going here. The system, growth, penalties, and finally rewards. The words with unknown meanings fell on his lap, one after the other. Just what will it help grow? And what will it reward me with? Seeing the words that could only be found in a video game appearing before his eyes without any prior explanations only served to confound him even further. He decided to worry about the confusing words later and calmly opened the next message. Gulp. Jean Wu unconsciously swallowed his saliva after reading that rather suggestive title. His heart began to beat faster in anticipation. Tearing. Daily quest. Preparations to become stronger. Press up 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Sit up 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Squat 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Running 10 kilometers. Incomplete, 0/10. Warning, incompletion of daily quests will result in appropriate levels of punishment. Jean Wu reflexively spat out a dumbfounded chuckle after confirming the content of the message. Ha. Seriously, man. Should this be the feelings of disappointment? To think what the grand-sounding daily quest, the one titled Preparations to Become Strong, was nothing more than a list of physical exercises to train his body. Well, for sure, if he did as the quest said, then his body might get a bit tougher. Was this what that growth and reward thing the system was talking about? Now that I think about it, he recalled reading a quote of a person with an inner problem should pay attention to the inner voice from some book in the past. In other words, one would see what they wanted to see, eventually. Just how desperately did he want to become stronger that he ended up seeing this stupid hallucination? Although it was funny, he also felt a bit lonely inside. If anyone could become stronger by doing these exercises, who would be willing to go through that much hardship? Then, Jean Wu shook his head. He suddenly thought that he was a fool for searching for answers to his many questions from a D***MN hallucination. Ugh, I don't care anymore. Jean Wu lied down spread-eagled on the bed. He wordlessly stared at the ceiling. He wasn't doing anything important, yet the time continued to tick by. Just as he began to feel the weight of the stillness filling up his hospital room, Jean Wu abruptly raised his torso off the bed. But what if something could change? As his thoughts were filled half with the uncertain expectation and the other half by unconvinced curiosity, he began wondering whether he should at least give it a shot. Well, I've got nothing to lose, anyways. There would be no reason not to try it out if he treated it as a light workout to stretch his muscles or something, no? He made up his mind. Fine, let's try it. Jean Wu climbed off the bed and stretched himself for a bit, before leaning against the corner of the bed and slowly performed the press-up. 1, 2, 3. The count started from 1 and quickly climbed upwards. 97, 98, 99, 100. Since he started this thing, he decided to do all 100, but quite different from his expectation. Nothing happened when he was finished. Other than his arms aching just a little, that was, just what the hell am I doing? Jean Wu smirked helplessly and stood straight up. Congratulations on becoming a player. Read. Daily quest. Preparations to become strong is now available. Read. The messages were now marked as read. There were no more words of unread messages popping up in his view, and he also didn't feel like humoring this hallucination anymore, either. He had enough of this, in other words. Jean Wu closed the mailbox without regret. Yawn. Jin Woo yawned out at length and climbed back up on the bed. He felt sleepy as if he had pushed himself too hard. The sky outside the window was already dyed in the colors of the sunset. It's already this late, huh? The monitoring division agents said earlier that his hospital fees will be taken care of by the association. He figured that it wouldn't be too late to leave after receiving a thorough examination of his body and get the all-clear from the doctors first. Jin Woo lay down comfortably while thinking as such. I'm sure these hallucinations and weird things I hear will eventually go away with time. His eyelids slowly closed shut, and Jin Woo drifted away into a deep slumber. Tick-tock. Even when Jin Woo was softly snoring to himself, the needles of the clock hanging by the wall continued to tick away. The needles spun and spun around until they indicated 11:59 and 57 seconds p.m. Tick-tock, tick. 58, 59, 60. The needles stopped moving precisely as they touched 12 hours. You failed to complete the daily quest. You'll be transferred to the penalty zone for a set period of time. Rumble. Jin Woo's eyes shot right open from the violent tremor that shook his entire body. An earthquake? Jin Woo sat right up and grabbed the edges of the bed. The shaking was so bad that he couldn't maintain his balance. Rumble. The shaking got progressively worse as the seconds ticked by. It happened then. SFX for things turning into powder and falling to the floor. One of the steel bars on the bed he held on for dear life suddenly broke. No, it didn't break per se, but simply disappeared. Jin Woo hurriedly looked at his palm. No steel bar there, just grains of sand. Sand! The other steel bar also transformed into sand as well. Meanwhile, the earthquake became even more violent. Ruinable. You walk. In the end, Jin Woo was thrown off from the bed. He bounced around all over the hospital room and screamed out. Even when that was happening, items within the room was turning into sand one at a time. Yuawa. Plop. Jin Woo was flung away and got deposited rather unceremoniously. He felt something soft against his fingertips. They happened to be ultra-fine grains of sand, and the accursed earthquake had stopped. Tui. Tui. Jin Woo spat out the sand in his mouth and hurriedly raised his head up. His eyes caught the sight on an endless plain of nothing but sand. Jin Woo frowned heavily and got up. All the sand that found its way inside his clothes poured out. He dusted the sand caked on his chest while taking a look around him. Indeed, all he could see was sand. And more sand. A desert? This couldn't be real. Until a few moments ago, he was sleeping on a bed inside a hospital located in the middle of Seoul. But now, as soon as he opened his eyes, he was in the middle of a massive desert. Jin Woo scooped up a handful of sand and let it slip through his fingers. The fine grains fell straight down to the ground. There is not a single breeze here. It wasn't just the breeze, though. When he raised his head up to look, the sky didn't have a sun, a moon, or any stars for that matter. It was an empty sky, as if it was filled up with black ink and nothing else. However, for some reason, he had no trouble seeing it all. Just where is this place? It happened then. Shururururu. Suddenly, the sandy ground next to him caved in and a deep pit formed there. Huh. Jin Woo desperately ran away, so he could avoid getting sucked in down there. The sandy pit grew wider and wider, and eventually, Jin Woo had to crawl on all fours just to pull himself out. Pant, pant, pant. He plopped down on his butt, panted heavily, and stared at the bottom of the pit. Quite bizarrely, he could see that the sand at the bottom was boiling. Realizing that just one misstep would have resulted in him falling in, there sent shivers down his spine. Hang on a minute. Jin Woo's eyes narrowed in suspicion. It's not actually boiling, is it? When he took a closer look, he spotted something pretty big wiggling down there. Jin Woo instinctively forced himself up. He was getting a really bad premonition right about now. Sure enough, just as Jin Woo took a step back, the sand within the pit suddenly exploded upwards. Fush-a-dash! The falling sand emitted the roar of a waterfall. Jin Woo's eyes went extra round in the meantime. And an insect? The identity of the thing that exploded out from the sand was a giant centipede. Ki-ai-ik. When fully revealed, the D*MN thing's head almost reached the height equaling that of a 5-story building. Jin Woo anxiously swallowed his saliva. This is unreal. For sure, the B Asterisk starred was unrealistically huge. He had never heard of centipede this big existing in the world before. But the size of the centipede wasn't the only thing that shocked Jin Woo. Why is there a name floating on top of that monster? Was he dreaming again? Jin Woo closed and opened his eyes again, yet nothing had changed. Even now, there were 5 red words floating on top of the monster's head, just like a monster from a video game might have. The poison-fanged, giant desert centipede. Just like its horrendous and bizarre appearance, its name, too, was something Head liked to avoid at all cost. What drew his attention the most was the 2 letters poison and fanged. He spotted a pair of fangs as large as a child, jutting out just below the B asterisk star jaw. It didn't take a genius to figure out what might happen if he got stabbed by those fangs simply from its name alone. Seeing those large fangs and its jaw constantly opening and closing, it was as if it's busy licking its lips, right? It was then the sound went off in his head again. Tearing. Penalty quest. Survival. Goal. Please survive until the end of the time limit. Time limit. 4 hours. Remaining time. 4 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Are you kidding me? However, as soon as the remaining time changed to 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, the centipede parted sand and rushed towards him as if it couldn't wait any longer. SFX for sand parting ways. Well, what the hell? Jin Woo hurriedly spun around and ran for his life. There was no time to deliberate on things. If he wanted to live, then he had to run. That was the only thought racing in his head. However, even before he had taken several steps, another pillar of sand exploded upwards not too far from his position. Boom! Yuck! Jin Woo fell on his rear from the powerful shockwave. He rolled on the sandy ground before urgently getting back up. He swiped the sand off his face before his eyes shot open even wider. This time, it wasn't just 1 or 2 of them. Boom! Before he had even noticed it, there were 7 sand centipedes jutting out from the sand, and they were all glaring at him. Keech! Keek! As the centipedes issued shrill cries, Jin Woo's complexion changed for the worse. A lot worse. God D***** in it. Jin Woo reappeared in the hospital room exactly 4 hours later. Plop! Jin Woo keeled over on the floor and painfully wheezed out. Cough, cough. Tooey, tooey. His mouth felt full with this coarse, grainy taste. His eyes stung badly, too, seemingly like sand particles got in there. Jin Woo whimpered and groaned for a long time, before powerlessly falling flat on his back. He didn't have any energy left to lift even a finger. Pant! Pant! Just! What was that? Jin Woo continued to pant heavily when a new message appeared before him. You've completed the penalty quest. Jin Woo's expression crumpled into something unsightly. A penalty quest? Did he do something worthy of being punished? Jin Woo carefully retreaded his memories until he recalled the daily quest he abandoned midway yesterday. Could it be? Now that he thought about it, it definitely said that if the quest was not completed, he'd be hit with a corresponding penalty. Pant, pant, that was not a hallucination. Indeed, it was not a hallucination, nor was it a dream. There was no need to pinch his cheeks to confirm whether this was a dream or reality. When he was running around, the shortness of breath felt so suffocatingly harsh, and the pain he felt when he got grazed by the centipede's leg still felt fresh in his mind. Everything happened for real. He nearly died back there. This is way too much. Pant, pant. The so-called penalty turned out to be him being thrown into a D** in Min execution ground. At the same time, another ominous premonition rushed into his mind. If this event was indeed caused by the daily quest thing, then without a doubt, this would not be the last time. Sure enough, he got to hear yet another mechanical beep going off in his head. He flinched in surprise, but thankfully it was not about another quest or anything like that. Rewards for completing the penalty quest is now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Y/N. Rewards. The word rewards jumped right out. Too bad. The problem was he currently didn't have any energy left whatsoever to confirm this and that. His situation simply didn't allow that. Never mind giving me rewards or not. Let me take a break first. His sights gradually blurred. Soon, Jinwoo fell into a deep slumber akin to a blackout. Oh my gosh, what happened in here? Next morning, a nurse entered Jinwoo's room, only for her eyes to open up wide in surprise. The patient was lying sprawled on the floor, while sand was everywhere as far as she could see. Not only that, the patient too was full of sand as well. She threw the medical chart on the bed and urgently pressed the emergency buzzer. Please, someone get over here right away. Soon, the doctor in charge rushed into the room. What happened? What's the matter with Mr. Sung Jinwoo? I don't know. Everything was fine until last night, yet this morning. For now, let's relocate him back on the bed. 2. Two people lifted Jinwoo off the floor and placed him back on the bed. During the process, the back of Jinwoo's hand got scratched by the edge of the medical chart left on the bed, and his skin tore, just a little, but no one noticed that. Let's take a look. The doctor then carefully examined Jinwoo's condition. However, he couldn't find anything wrong with the youth. What the heck? Isn't he just in a deep sleep? The doctor spat out a sigh of relief. The Hunters Association had requested the hospital to pay special attention to this particular patient. Understandably, the doctor was scared almost out of his wits while thinking that something bad had happened here. For now, let's let him be. Looks like he's in a really deep slumber at the moment. The doctor in charge spoke to the nurse and was about to leave, but then he took a look around the room and scratched the side of his head. By the way, this room might need a thorough cleaning. Miss Ura, please take care of tidying this place up. Yes, I shall, doctor. The doctor left the room and the nurse, Choi Ura, patted her chest down. What a relief that it turned out to be nothing to worry about. Sure, they might not be the patient or the relatives of one themselves, but you wouldn't find a doctor or a nurse who wished ill on those they were in charge of. The Hunters Hospital especially saw many heavily injured patients every day. At the bare minimum, she'd like to never see another one of patients she was looking after get worse under her care. Phew, she had calmed down a little now, and began worrying about where should she start tidying this room up, but then her eyes spotted drops of blood on the floor. Oh my! The blood droplets were coming from the tip of patient's hand that fell outside the bed. She got stunned by this and hurriedly searched for the wound on Jinwoo's hand before flipping it around. What's going on here? There definitely was a trace of flowing blood, but she could not find a single wound. She wiped the blood clean, yet the expected wound was not there. Wait, could his injury heal in that short time? Ura's heart began beating faster as she cautiously studied Jinwoo's complexion. He was still submerged in a deep, deep sleep even now. Part 7, Daily Quest. Daily Quest is now available. Jinwoo's eyes shot right open. He quickly raised himself up, and the first thing he did was to check the time. The needles of the clock just went past 16:30, meaning there was the leeway of 7 hours and 30 minutes before midnight. Good. Jinwoo opened the mailbox. Daily Quest. Preparations to become strong. Press up 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Sit up 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Squat 100 times. Incomplete, 0 out of 100. Running 10 kilometers. Incomplete, 0/10. Warning: incompletion of daily quests will result in appropriate levels of punishment. It's the same thing again. He groaned out almost reflexively. No, perhaps this was for the better. Rather than a quest with impossible or hard-to-understand goals, this was far more preferable instead. Well, as long as he had enough time, he'd be able to complete this quest after all, although his body might suffer for a bit. Jinwoo got down to the floor this time and began the press-up. 1. Obviously, he was not planning on being dragged to yet another suspicious place and get almost killed there. 2.th. Most uptod / vels a / republished on n Eurovelbj and c/o/m. He got lucky the previous night and survived, but there was no guarantee that would happen tonight as well. 3. He raised his head a little and confirmed the content of the quest, and noticed that every time he performed a press-up, it was being recorded in real time as well. You've completed one press-up. Press up 100 times. Incomplete, 7 out of 100. Press up 100 times. Incomplete, 8 out of 100. You want to make sure, so he only went down halfway and got back up, but as expected, that didn't count. Now he finally realized why the so-called press-ups of yesterday didn't count. He had to perform the proper press-ups, or it wouldn't be counted at all. Huh, give me a break. Jin-Woo was dumbfounded but didn't stop the exercise. He still had 50 more press-ups to go. After that, sit-ups, squats, and running were waiting for him. And 3 hours later, press up 100 times, complete 100 out of 100. Sit up 100 times, complete 100 out of 100. Squat 100 times, complete 100 out of 100. Running 10 kilometers, incomplete 9/10. Pant, 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 pant. Jin-Woo lapped the outer perimeter of the hospital once and arrived back in front of his room. He was currently bent over and panting out heavily. His heart felt like it might explode at any second, but he couldn't give up yet. I worked so crazy hard until now, so no way I would. He somehow managed to open the door and took a step forward. When he did that, total distance ran 10 kilometers. You've completed running 10 kilometers. It was finally over. Pant, pant. Jin-Woo fell down to his knees. His breath reeked of something sweet and bitter. His face and back were soaked in sweat. Pant, pant. As Jin-Woo tried to regulate his heavy, rough breathing while thick sweat drops continuously dripped down, a familiar message popped up in front of his eyes. You've completed daily quest. Preparations to become strong. Completion rewards have arrived. Would you like to confirm? Y/N. Jin-Woo momentarily thought about forgetting about everything and simply laying down in defeat, but quickly changed his mind. At least for now, he wanted to confirm what these reward things could actually be with his own eyes first. Confirm. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. 3 additional stat points. Reward 3. 1 random box. Would you like to collect them all? Why are there so many of them? That was the first thought to enter his dazed mind after he took a gander at the contents of his rewards. But when he thought about it a little deeper, one of those rewards seemed rather useful right now, and there was also one that made him curious about what it could actually mean. For now, he urgently needed the first reward available. He was on the brink of collapsing here. Since there really was a penalty for failure, the odds of completion rewards being real were pretty D*MN high as well. Well, trying wouldn't hurt anyways, right? Seriously, this thing wouldn't throw him back into the penalty zone again after it said it'd give him the rewards. Now would it? As soon as he muttered that out, a gentle blue aura enveloped him. Isn't this sensation? That? Right away, he recalled Lee Ju-hyu's face. When he was getting healed by her, he felt the sensation similar to what he was feeling right now. If he were to put this feeling into words, then it'd be like a refreshing blast of air entering his lungs before leaving again, something like that. Shoo! He felt the blue aura slowly dissipating. For some reason, he kind of felt a bit rueful. Jin-Woo got up from the floor and lightly jumped up and down on the spot and stretched his body this way and that. How can this be? His heart that felt like it might explode was beating calmly now, and his rough breathing had stabilized as well. He didn't even feel a speck of fatigue. His body that was on the brink of collapsing felt refreshed, as if he just got up from a night of good rest. The effect, in other words, was top-notch. Isn't this really amazing? Jin-Woo's eyes now resembled circles. He wasn't sure whether this was some kind of magic or not, but this phenomenon could change him in the most astonishing way, without a doubt. In that case, would those stat points be the same? When Jin-Woo shifted his gaze around, he spotted a small box resting on top of the bed, as well as his own stat window floating in the air. I guess that thing over there is the random box. The important thing was his stat window, though. This window displayed simple information about himself. Name, Song Jin-Woo. Level 1. Class, none. Title, none. HP, 100. MP, 10. Tiredness, 0. Stat, Strength, 10. Stamina, 10. Agility, 10. Intelligence, 10. Perception, 10. Available points to distribute, 3. Skills. Passive skills. Unknown LV max. Tenacity LV1. Active skills. Dash LV1. The stat he saw was quite similar to a starting character from an online game he used to play many moons ago. Is this my current stat value? His current level was 1. All of his stats were also at the bottom of the heap too. If he thought about the current reality of what he was like, the one where he was ranked as the weakest even among the ranky hunters, then there was nothing to be surprised about there. What he paid attention to was the skills column. A passive skill called tenacity and an active one called dash. For some reason, he felt rather familiar with them. I remember now. Yesterday, or to be more precise, back in the early dawn of this morning, he remembered hearing those words while being chased around by the centipedes in the penalty zone. It happened probably after 3 hours of him constantly running for his dear life. He was suddenly greeted by a couple of new messages. Skill, -LV1 has been learned. Skill, tenacity LV1 has been learned. Back then, he was far too busy running to think about what they could mean, but it was a different story now. Jin Woo confirmed the explanations available for the skills. Skill, -LV1, active skill, mana required to activate. 5. The constant running fortified your legs. When this skill is activated, your movement speed will increase by 30%. During its activation, 1 mana will be spent every minute. Skill, tenacity LV1. Passive skill, mana required to activate. None. You possess untiring tenacity. When your stamina drops below 30%, this skill will automatically activate and reduce all damage received by 50%. Did I learn dash and tenacity because I stubbornly ran around like there's no tomorrow? That seemed to be about right. In other words, if he kept on repeating a certain action over and over again and happened to meet the requirement conditions, he would be able to learn new skills. Holy cow, wasn't this an incredible advantage? The thing was, the skills individual hunters used were acquired when they went through the awakening process, or learned through the items called runestones that dropped very rarely from monsters ranked A and above. Understandably, the prices of these runestones would start from the lowest of several 100,000 won to dozens of billion wons at the top end. At the last auction, the most expensive runestone was sold for around 70 billion TL, over $62 million. Apparently, this runestone contained a skill that could revert many injured people back to their original conditions in one go. It was snapped up by an anonymous overseas rank S healer who had reputedly emptied out his entire life savings. Jin Woo's heart began beating faster, a skill that increased his movement speed, as well as another that decreased the amount of damage received. Sure, they weren't as good as those skills that sold for billions of won, but they were still amazing to him regardless. And he got to learn those for free too. His overall magic energy value was too low, so it'd be hard to use them properly, but still, it was better than not knowing them, wasn't it? Besides, the tenacity skill doesn't even need mana to activate too. It seemed that this mana thing was his magic energy. If that was the case, then even though he didn't have a lot of magic energy, he'd be able to freely use the tenacity skill. That alone was a huge gain. By the way, what could this unknown thing be? The unknown that occupied one whole slot of the passive skills column. Since it was located in the passive column, that meant it activated automatically, but there was not one explanation or any information on it. Not even a single clue. The amount of information he could learn was just too limited. Even if he burst his brain trying to figure it out, he knew there wouldn't be any answers. So, Jin Woo shifted his gaze to elsewhere. Stat points, is it? 3 additional stat points he got as a reward remained there, still to be distributed. I'm sure this means I can increase any one of my stats by 3 points, right? There were 5 categories in the list of stats. Maybe because he was a mere level 1, the values of each stat were simple, to say the least. However, if he considered how reality operated, he couldn't take these stats lightly at all. If his abilities changed for real with a moment's decision, then who in this world would be able to casually make such choices? Jin Woo's expression became serious. Strength is no doubt talking about my physical power. He could more or less figure out what strength, stamina, and agility could mean. After all, those are the kind of stats one would often encounter in video games. The question was with the last 2 stats, intelligence and perception, then. And just like before, The unfriendly system didn't provide any answers whatsoever. If he increased intelligence, would he get actually smarter, for instance? And if he increased perception, then would he become more sensitive? Whatever the case may have been, he felt that those two stats didn't really seem all that useful to him right now. He was a melee-type hunter to begin with. What he needed was power, speed, or even stamina. If you were to ask me to choose between the three, I'd inevitably go with strength. If he got physically stronger, many things would become that much easier for him. Also, he wanted to find out what kind of change would take place with his body once the stat values had been increased. Since he thought that this change would be much more prominent with the increase in the strength stat, he ended up investing all 3 points on it. All 3 points to the strength stat. Tiering. Strength, 13. Available points to distribute, 0. Is that all? Indeed, it looked like it. The only change he could tell was the strength stat value floating in front of his eyes like hologram projection, changing from 10 to 13. Unlike how it was in cartoons or movies, his body didn't feel like it was overflowing with uncontrollable power or anything like that. Did anything actually change or not? He decided to use his muscles to find out. Jin Woo stood next to the bed and lifted it. He felt a bit of weight, but he was able to pick it up easier than he thought. However, he found it impossible to tell whether this was because of the bed being light or his strength having been improved. I should have lifted the bed first before spending the D*MN points. Since he had already spent all the points before confirming, it was hard to tell the difference between before and after. Only if I had some more points to spend. Jin Woo licked his lips in regret only for a certain memory to jump out at him. The rewards from the penalty quest. Today wasn't the only time he got to complete the daily quests. He might have nearly died, but he sure as hell did complete the penalty quest, and he remembered seeing the message about the rewards being available as well. Jin Woo hurriedly opened the mailbox. Rewards for completing the penalty quest is now available. Would you like to confirm the rewards? Y/N. I knew it. Jin Woo clenched his fists tightly. Of course, it's a resounding yes. The following rewards are available. Reward 1. 3 additional stat points. Reward 2. 1 random box. Would you like to collect them all? Unlike the daily quest rewards, the option of the full status recovery was absent, but well, what he needed right now was the additional stat points anyways. He was momentarily worried about there being a huge difference in rewards since they were from a penalty quest and all, but he was relieved to find 3 points waiting for him. Jin Woo hummed joyously to himself. Add all 3 points to the strength stat. Strength, 16. His strength jumped up from 13 to 16. Jin Woo stood next to the bed again and put some strength in his arms, and he was able to lift up the bed a lot easier than before. He could definitely tell the difference now. It's for real. His physical strength had really improved. If he were to consider the change purely through the stats alone, then the starting value of 10 had increased by 60%, so how could he fail to notice the improvement? Now feeling completely elated, he went around the room and began picking up not just the bed, but everything he could lay his hands on, and generally made a mess of things inside. Only after the chief nurse passing by heard the commotion and scolded him did he stop his tomfoolery. But I'm very sorry. As soon as the chief nurse left his room, Jin Woo spat out a sigh of relief. Phew. However, he couldn't calm down at all. His heart was beating like crazy. Thud, 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 thud. As a matter of fact, his chest actually hurt. The daily quest that would continue to show up every day, and the stat points as the reward. As long as this unexplainable phenomenon didn't come to a sudden end, he'd be able to live a completely different life to the one he'd been leading until now. This was an unbelievable opportunity for him. Besides that, the stat window also showed his level. Does this mean I can also increase my level too? Eventually, though Jin Woo shook his head. Yeah, there's no way. Now that would be too good to be true. He wasn't hoping that far, anyway. The rewards from the quests alone were plenty enough for him. He'd used the stat points to increase his abilities. Every day, he'd grow to be stronger compared to yesterday. He'd be stronger today. Compared to today, he'd be stronger tomorrow. Me getting stronger? The ranky hunter, and also, always mocked as the weakest weapon? He didn't even think about climbing up as far as the rank S or A. Even the notion of getting to rank C or D, like those hunters had been working with, would surely be seen as a laughable one. Indeed, they disparagingly point their fingers at him and guffaw their heads off. Song Jin-woo was getting stronger? That's Song Jin-woo, the one and only on this planet? However, he didn't care if they laughed at him. No, he was already used to being the butt of many jokes. He was just happy that an opportunity had fallen on his lap. That was all. Suddenly, a question mark floated over his head. Could this be the process of my reawakening? Although extremely rare, the cases of bottom-tier hunters climbing up to the top through reawakening had happened before, for sure. If so, then could those hunters who got stronger through reawakening experience a similar sort of situation as he was in? Let's find out. Feeling genuinely curious now, Jin-woo settled down in front of a computer located at the corner of the hospital room. Since he was staying in a VIP room provided free of charge by the Hunters Association, this computer wasn't the only item of convenience found here. Tap, 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 tap. Jin-woo's fingers typed rapidly on the keyboard at v/\\, L/BIN, / for the B/S novel reading expiry, /N/C. Searching, and then more searching. He visited countless websites. He even entered those websites that one couldn't even get anywhere near without a hunter's license. He even resorted to paying for information and continued to rummage through every document and article he found. However, rather than finding similar events as his, he couldn't even find a single mention of a precedence either. It's different. His reawakening was completely different from the normal ones, as it turned out. Most other hunters who underwent reawakening process gained their newfound strength through roughly the similar process as their first awakening as a hunter. Not one of them had experienced hearing weird voices at the brink of death, nor did they get to increase their strength through stat values and such. Still, I can't be certain so. To be 100% sure, Song Jin-woo anonymously opened a thread on the internet forum exclusive to licensed hunters. Title: Something weird has happened to me. Description: I can suddenly see my stats and numbers like in a video game, and I can even increase their values too. Is there anyone who has experienced something similar to me? Below that OG post, comments figuratively exploded forth. Anon: LOL, why don't you stop F***ing around, dude? Anon: isn't he just a loon? Anon: lost his D***M in mind. Anon: maybe you've played too many games. Anon: by any chance, are you a cartoonist? Anon: go visit the nearest hospital, okay? Anon: I'd like to hear the details first. Anon: stop accepting all sorts of trash just because they hold the hunter license. This forum needs to go through a cleansing. Seriously now, TL. I removed all the pure Korean internet slangs / emojis from the raw. Learn my lesson from my previous novel. Dozens of comments, all with roughly the similar contents flooded in. F you. Jin-woo spat out a groan. He had spent a long time looking around, but he had nothing to show for his troubles. He got called a loon in the forum, and people disparaged him. He did all this, yet seeing that there was no information to gather. I guess that my case is really a unique one. He was the only one under the heavens. The most unique hunter in the whole world. He still needed some time to figure out how much of a help this strange phenomenon would provide, and just how far he could actually grow through it. But at least he got a good feeling about this whole thing. When he took a look outside, the night had deepened quite considerably. When did the time get so late? Jin-woo frowned deeply. His eyes ached a bit after staring into a computer monitor for so long. Jin-woo massaged his forehead and stood up from a chair to loosen his body with a bout of light stretching. He moved his body this way and that for a while. He bent his body 90 degrees, and that's when he discovered 2 small boxes lying forgotten on the floor. The random boxes. 2 boxes wrapped in the monotone gift wrappers and topped off with a ribbon exactly like the ones of video games. They must have fallen off from the bed when I was making a mess of the room earlier. He had completely forgotten about them after receiving those as his rewards. Jin-woo picked up the closest box and opened its lid. A Band-Aid? He dumbfoundedly stared at the thing that looked exactly like the regular Band-Aid for a while, only for the information about it to float up above in green letters. Item Band-Aid. A regular Band-Aid, useful in patching up small wounds, can be stored inside your inventory. It is a Band-Aid. He was hopeful that this thing might possess some kind of a special attribute like the treasures found within the dungeons, but he wasn't so lucky today. Of course, I haven't heard of someone finding Band-Aids inside a dungeon, to begin with. With his mind half in disappointment and the other half in anticipation, he opened the remaining box, and he got himself a brand new ballpoint pen. He studied it from all sorts of angles and even clicked on the tip so the ballpoint would come out, but it was still your average pen. Item ballpoint pen. An average ballpoint pen can be stored inside your inventory. It was quite likely that, as its name implied, all sorts of random junk would come out from the random boxes. Well, it wasn't as if he was left empty-handed anyway. Sure, he didn't really have any needs for either the Band-Aid or the pen right now, but thanks to them, he got to learn about the existence of the thing called the inventory. Also, seeing that the information on other objects found in the room did not show up, he figured that only the info on the items from the random box could be read. Inventory. As soon as he called out for his inventory, a graphical representation of a storage unit with dozens of slots appeared in the air. As fitting the storage unit of a level 1 user, it was not as empty as he thought. He thought there would be nothing in there, but inside the first slot, he found a rather familiar object. Isn't that? Jin Woo took that out immediately. Tearing. Item. Kim Sang-6 Steel Longsword. Attack +10. It was precisely Mr. Kim's sword that Jin Woo picked up back in the underground temple. He assumed that it was left behind inside the gate, though. Hey, nice to see you too. A smile formed on Jin Woo's face. He felt happy seeing this thing again, what with both of them having survived that hellish death trap. Besides, it was too wasteful to just be abandoned in a different dimension, wasn't it? Didn't Mr. Kim Juicy say he bought this for around $3 million? TL. Over $2,600. The weapons of hunters outwardly looked rather plain, but the truth was anything but. Monsters couldn't be damaged with weapons that did not carry the wielder's magic energy. So, weapons crafted especially for the purpose of dealing with those asterisk stars would always be quite pricey. Looks like I'll have to rely on this guy for a while. He had been fighting with his bare hands until now because he couldn't afford to buy a proper weapon. Although it was a cheap sword, he was still rather grateful for it. You're mine now. If Mr. Kim saw this sword in his hands in the future, he might start foaming at the mouth and angrily demand its return. Well, he was a selfish man who readily discarded the savior of his life, so it was rather a good possibility. However, both this sword and this opportunity were given to him in return for sacrificing his life. So, he wasn't planning to give it back that easily. Jin Woo's eyes sharpened considerably. He had learned 2 things about reality back in that temple. Firstly, he needed to become far, far stronger. He was weak and almost died several times as a result. That wasn't all. He knew what the results would be, yet he couldn't stop that choirboy hunter from stepping forward. And also, he knew Mr. Kim was in the wrong, but he could not help Mr. Song at all. Because he wanted to survive, he turned his gaze away, even though he knew what was right. If he didn't want to be ashamed of himself again, then he simply had to become stronger. And finally, there is no room for unnecessary kindness. What he got after his acts of kindness was the betrayal of his comrades. 3 of them abandoned him, who couldn't even move properly, and ran away. He desperately called out to them, but none returned to help him. None of them could remember just who had saved their lives only a few moments ago. Give and take. He swore not to take on any unnecessary risk out of some unconditional act of kindness. The most important thing at the end of the day was his own life, after all. Those were 2 important life lessons Jin Woo got to engrave in his heart after experiencing a near-death event. To become stronger than before, and to become more selfish than before. I can do this. Jin Woo was one of those types of people who would never forget what he had been taught. Inside a certain Pojangmaka. TL, the Korean-style covered street stall. The nurse Choi Yu-ra was busy chatting to a friend she hadn't seen in a long time as the night wore on. I almost forgot. Yura belatedly recalled that her friend was an employee of the Hunters Association. The reason for her finding work in the Hunters Hospital was in no small part due to this friend. You know a lot about hunters, right? Well, more than most people, sure. What's up? Is there a hunter with an ability to heal their own wounds really quickly? Aren't those healer-type hunters? One healing spell later, every wound goes bye-bye. No, not like magic and stuff. I mean like unconsciously. Like unconsciously, for example, when the person has lost consciousness or when he's in the middle of sleep. Yura's friend shook her head. Yeah, there's no way. That'd be something like regeneration, and that's an incredible ability, you know? That's a unique trait only the rarest of all top-tier monsters exceeding the ranks of A possess. There's no human who possesses it, though. I've never heard of a hunter who has such an ability. Oh, really? Could she have made a mistake, then? Yura slowly nodded her head. It was at this point that her friend spoke again. But then again, I don't know. Maybe it's possible if you're talking about S-ranked hunters. Hearing her friend's words, Yura raised her head. S-ranks? There are plenty of freakish monsters within the S-rank hunters, and also, not much is known about them. Right? What were they saying? Right. The hunter Baek Yinho from the White Tiger Guild can apparently morph into a real monster. However, Song Jinwoo was supposedly a hunter ranked E. The ranks of the hunters were publicly viewable on the association's website, so if anyone were interested, they could take a look. Yura became curious from the morning's incident, and she searched for Song Jinwoo's information.th. Most uptod/nvelze/ republished on n0velbjin c/o/m. His rank is too low for him to possess such a unique ABI. The reawakening of a hunter. She then remembered hearing hushed whispers of reawakening coming from Jinwoo's room when she was walking past it yesterday. Could it be that he had gone through a reawakening? For most regular people, it was truly impossible to befriend an S-ranked hunter, never mind encountering one. Not only were there too few of them, but they also happened to be crazy busy most of the time as well. So, just what kind of situation was this? Someone as amazing as that was a patient she was looking after. A guy who just entered the S rank, having moved up from the lowly E. If there are only a few people who realize his true value, then, if she scored some points with him now, wouldn't it be more likely that she'd be awarded more opportunities later down the line? A chance to become acquaintances with a rank S hunter didn't happen every day, after all. They were an existence that people couldn't easily meet, even if they were prepared to shell out lots of money. As her imagination took flight, a bright smile slowly bloomed on Yura's face. Oh my gosh, you girl, did something nice happen? Why are you suddenly grinning like that out of the blue? Oh, it's nothing, you know. Nothing much. Yura continued to shake her head, but the smile on her lips didn't want to go away that easily. Part 8. Level up. Oh my goodness. Look at that guy's physique. Was that patient's body that good before? Two young female nurses walking in the corridor whispered to each other as soon as they spotted Song Jinwoo. He pretended to have not heard them and quietly returned to his room. It had been a week since he started taking on the daily quests. Several changes took place during this time. One of them happened to be the transformation of his body. Jinwoo stood before the mirror mounted on the hospital room's wall by the corner. He checked out his entire body in front of this full-length mirror. He got a bit embarrassed by doing something that a female university student would more likely end up doing, and only after clearing his throat twice was he able to stare straight at the mirror. The thing was, though, he had definitely changed. His body was in the middle of a transformation. I got muscles now. The most eye-catching change was the drastic increase of his muscles. The normal-looking flabby flesh was gradually disappearing, only to be replaced by hard muscles. Thanks to that, his shoulders had widened more and his overall frame had grown bigger as well. Even then, it doesn't seem heavy and slow. Only the necessary amount of muscles in the necessary places. If he were to describe the overall impression his body gave off, then would it be kind of like looking swift and athletic? He was a guy, and even he found this rather appealing. So it wasn't such a strange thing for young nurses to whisper about him. And it's all due to this guy over here. Jinwoo summoned his stat window. Name, Song Jinwoo. Level 1. Class None. Title None. HP 100. MP 10. Tiredness 0. Stat. Strength 31. Stamina 10. Agility 10. Intelligence 10. Perception 10. Available points to distribute 0. Skills. Passive skills. Unknown LV Max. Tenacity LV1. Active skills. Dash LV1. His strength stat had gone past 30 already. Since he thought that it'd be hard to tell the kind of effects the increases in other stats would bring, he ended up investing all the points he earned on the strength stat, which seemed to be the easiest way to feel the change taking place within. Besides, strength played a key role when fighting monsters, so that was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. My body wouldn't have transformed by this much just because I exercised for a few days. In that case, there could be only one explanation. With his strength value continuously rising up, the muscles were changing their shapes in order to display the maximum amount of effect, too. He couldn't think of any other reason besides that one. He was inwardly worried about investing too many points to the strength stat, but after seeing his transformed body, he became rather happy and all the worries in his mind were forgotten for now. However, it is way too eye-catching, isn't it? The number of times he was mentioned by the nurses was constantly on the rise. It was quite likely that, since their job involved looking after human bodies, their levels of discernment could have been higher than most. Jin Woo possessed quite a keen sense of hearing, so whenever his name was mentioned in the vicinity, he took note of it. I guess it's time for me to leave this hospital. No? It was not good to be the center of attention. Not only would he feel uncomfortable being placed under the spotlight, but he also didn't want to let others know of this strange phenomenon. Didn't the old saying go something like, scratching unnecessarily results in more flakes to clean up, or something like that? He wanted to increase his stat points as quietly as possible, and it shouldn't be a problem for me to leave the hospital now, too. Thankfully, tests had shown that he was normal and healthy, meaning he could leave at any time he wanted. No, hang on a minute. It kind of felt like that both the hospital and the association wanted him to leave in the first place. Well, it'd be a waste to spend that much money as hospital fee on a measly rank E like him. One of the special privileges the S-rank hunters enjoyed was the government paying for all of their health-related expenses. Of course, that was a story happening in another cosmos as far as Jinwoo was concerned. So, he figured that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to leave this hospital right about now. And there was something he wanted to confirm as well. Now, where did I put it? Jinwoo rummaged around his pockets and brought something out. It was a key gleaming in a golden hue. It featured such a simple design that it could be passed off as an accessory at a casual glance. Jinwoo observed the key for a long time before he secured it back inside his pocket. While he was in the middle of being discharged, a certain young female nurse hurriedly ran to where he was. Pant! Mr. Song Jinwoo, are you getting ready to be discharged today? Pardon? Yes, I am. She was the nurse in charge of his care, Choi Yura. Yura formed a rueful expression when she heard his affirmation. Jinwoo didn't know why, so he could only stand there looking rather confused. He wondered if he had made a mistake somewhere, but he couldn't think of anything. Yura hesitated slightly before pulling out a small memo pad. We'll be okay if you give me your contact numbers? My contact numbers? Yes, only if you're okay with it. Could there be some test results that needed to be sent at a later date or something? Jinwoo didn't think too much about it and took the memo pad. However, all he got from her was just that, a memo pad and nothing else. When Jinwoo stared at her, her face reddened. What's the matter? Well, about a pen. Please wait. She must have forgotten in her rush to get here. Yura became flustered and hurriedly turned around. Hang on a minute. A pen, is it? He didn't have to think for long. Before anyone noticed it, he was already holding a pen. The moment he thought about the pen nestled quietly within his inventory, it automatically appeared in his hand. Once an item was placed within the inventory, he could retrieve it freely with his thoughts alone. What a convenient feature of the inventory that was. Confirming the pen in his hand, Jinwoo called out to Yura. Wait, I looked and luckily enough, I had a pen on me. Oh, really? Phew, what a relief. Yura placed a hand on her chest and sighed out in relief. Jinwoo smiled at that, and he jotted down his phone number. This happened all the time. Now, the items that came out of the random box always saw some sort of usage pretty soon after he got them. When a raincoat came out, rain fell the next day. He got a cup the day before the hospital inexplicably ran out of paper cups. Of course, stuff like a Band-Aid with no clear uses sometimes popped out, but most of the time, they did come in handy. Here it is. Yura received the memo pad back from Jin Woo with an elated expression etched on her face. She then bowed her head as well. Please take care of me from now on. Oh, sure thing. Me too. Yura spun around and hurriedly disappeared as somewhere. Jin Woo looked at her departing back and tilted his head this way and that. By the way, how does she expect me to take care of her? She was such a cute nurse to begin with, yet she was even courteous as well. Jin Woo thought as such and left the hospital with a refreshed, airy mind. The first place he visited was the HQ of the Hunters Association, located in the district of Guro in Seoul. The smartphones used by the hunters were designed with special components, so, in order to get one, he had to apply for it at the association. The association employee spoke while looking at the computer monitor. Looks like your phone will become available only after 2 weeks, Hunternim. Pardon me? Why so long? Jin Woo's eyes opened up wider. His old phone was smashed to bits when he was getting chased around by the god statue. However, he now had to wait for 2 weeks for a new phone to arrive. If you need a phone right away, we can loan you one on a temporary basis, but the fee for each usage is 50,000 TL, just over $44. 50,000 won. He wasn't even buying one, just renting it for a little while, yet it cost that much. If he thought about his current financial status, that was way too big an expense. Well, it's not like someone will contact me, anyway. If the association failed to get hold of someone on his or her smartphone, they'd call the house instead. So, there was no real reason for him to spend money and get himself a temp phone right now. Jin Woo shook his head. We'll just wait. I understand. As soon as your replacement phone arrives, we will send it straight to your residence. Thank you. Jin Woo got up to leave. His business was done here. He had already completed the daily quest that never failed to show up every day, and the application for the new phone at the association also ended faster than he expected. Jin Woo exited from the association building and pulled the golden key out again. Is it now time to check this little guy out, then? The information on the key floated up in green letters. Item, dungeon key, rarity, ED, also reflects the difficulty in acquiring the item. Type key, a key that transfers you to an instant dungeon. Can be used at the third exit of the Hapjeong subway station. He found this key inside one of the random boxes he got as the daily quest rewards. At first, he wondered why a key would come out from there, but once he saw the rarity category, he immediately realized that this was no ordinary item. This was one of the reasons prompting him to get discharged from the hospital as well. An entrance key to the instant dungeon. Whether it was called instant or not, a dungeon was a dungeon. If it was about dungeons, then he had plenty of painful memories regarding those. This one time, he participated in a raid ranked E and ended up getting wounded so badly that he had to stay in the hospital for over a week. Back then, he was able to survive because of the comrades that went with him, but if he used this key to enter a dungeon, then it meant that he had to enter it all alone. He deliberated for a long time before making up his mind. I'm sure there will be no problems as long as I just take a quick peek inside. If things look bad, all he had to do was run away, after all. Had been running 10 kilometers every day for a while now, so he was pretty confident of running away, actually, and it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Slam, slam. Is there a wall blocking me? He pounded on the invisible wall and shouted at the outside, but no one replied back. People continued to carry on with their own lives, that was all. Sometimes, someone approached the Hapjeong station, but they simply vanished as soon as coming in contact with this invisible wall. It was quite likely that the place he was in and the outside world were two separate dimensions. Jin Woo tried his hardest to force his way out of this place, which prompted a new alert message to pop up. Tearing. You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find the return crystal. It was the same message as before. The key in his possession disappeared as soon as he set foot inside the third exit of the subway station, and By the time Jinwoo realized things had gone rather awry and hurriedly turned around to leave, it was already too late. He was thinking of finding a hidden gate or some kind of a doorway within the third exit that would transport him to a dungeon. But his expectation was completely off the mark, and quite different from the regular dungeons. He couldn't even leave as he pleased, too. It's different from other dungeons. Jinwoo spat out a long groan and looked behind him. What he could see now was the interior of the subway station that had transformed into a jungle. Walls were thick with twisting vines, and rancid odor akin to rotting corpses assaulted his senses. Hell, he even heard the cries of what sounded like wild beasts from afar every now and then, too. It wasn't that there was a hidden entrance somewhere near the entrance of the Hapjeong station, but the entire station had become a dungeon instead. Jinwoo pulled the steel longsword out from his inventory. Item: Kim Sang-6 steel longsword. Attack plus 10. His back was blocked off, and he had no method of contacting outside, so the only option left was to go forward. Jinwoo nervously swallowed his saliva and slowly descended the steps. He held his breath and surveyed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything particular. However, it was truly forbidden to underestimate the dangers in a dungeon. Among the low-ranked monsters, there were quite a few that knew how to mask and hide their presence very well. No, maybe because they were so low-ranked that they had no choice but to hide and wait to ambush their prey. Past the toilets, he entered deeper and encountered the underground shopping center. Shops were worn down and in complete disarray, looking more like a ruin than anything else. Seeing the human-less ruined shells of the shops dimly illuminated by the flickering overhead lamps, something felt rather ominously creepy and sinister. Flicker, flicker. A few of the lamps continued to flicker as if their life was nearing the end. Jinwoo carefully stepped on the overgrown weeds jutting out from between the cracked floor tiles and continued on forward, but he picked up on a general aura of unease and scanned his surroundings. Everything seemed so quiet and still, but he did sense a gaze of something. And then there was this smell, too. A seriously rotten odor of an animal carcass with flies buzzing around was coming from somewhere. For Jinwoo, who had frequently entered dungeons, this was a rather familiar smell. This smell, an animal-type monster. However, he still couldn't find its whereabouts at all, just like how a predator would stalk its prey. Oh, so you want to remain hidden and wait for your chance? Is that it? In that case, he should give it one. Jinwoo deliberately turned around and presented his back, and very slowly retread the path he had taken until now. An animal would try pounce on the prey as soon as its back was shown. An animal-type monster would be no different. And so, it happened when he took his third step. Smash! The shop window of a clothing store behind him shattered into pieces, and something jumped out. And this something, as soon as it landed on the ground, leapt towards Jinwoo's exposed neck in one go. Roar! Jinwoo had been getting ready for a sneak attack like this one, so almost immediately, he swung the sword in the direction of the sound. It was a perfectly executed instinctive counter. Swish! The sharp edge of the blade sliced open the creature's maw. The monster spat out a pained cry as it flew away from Jinwoo and crashed on the ground, rolling around in a heap. SFX for a dog-type whimpering repeated. It was a huge wolf with a reddish coat of fur. The wolf, with its maw sliced away, wiggled around and threw a seizure-like fit as if it was under a great deal of pain. When he took a closer look, its name also appeared on top of its head, just like the centipedes from the penalty zone. Iron-fanged Leakin. However, unlike before, its name was in white letters, not red. There is no time to waste here. This was the perfect opportunity while the monster could not move from its wound. Jinwoo threw his body forward. He ran hard and fast and chopped down with his sword, separating the creature's head from its body. Roar! Leakin spat out the final roar and stopped breathing afterwards. You've killed an iron-fanged Leakin. Good. However, the joy of victory was temporary. Two more Lycans jumped out from their hiding place from behind the shop's darkness. It was in a pack. Jinwoo's eyes grew wider. They bared their big fangs and closed the distance in an instant. Jin Woo's expression crumpled dismally. He must have chopped down too hard from all the excitement, because the sword was lodged on the ground too deep, and it stubbornly refused to come out. It stuck somewhere. It was at this moment that one of the lichens aimed for his face and leapt up. *M in it. Jin Woo ducked low. The lichen flew over his head and landed face first on the ground after failing to stop in time. Stab! When its fangs stabbed into the stone floor, cracks instantly formed on the hard surface. I guess it's not called Iron Fang for nothing. Huh. Of course, he didn't have the leeway to stay there and admire this scene. One more monster was still running towards his front at the moment, too. His sword showed no signs of coming free from its earthly prison for the time being. Screw this. Jin Woo had no choice but to give up on the sword for now and threw a hard punch at the lichen closing in. Whoosh! Accompanied by a bone-chilling sound of wind parting ways, his fist flew straight forward. Pow! It took just one hit, and the head of the lichen simply exploded. The corpse of the now headless lichen slammed into the ceiling above and then powerlessly fell down to the ground. Thud! Jin Woo's eyes opened up very wide, and he stared dumbfoundedly at his own fist. What an unexpected destructive power that was. The sole surviving lichen, the one that flew over Jin Woo's head just now, lowered its tail after seeing this scene and began taking faltering steps backwards. Huh. Was this the result from him raising his strength stat? The utterly stunned Song Jin Woo couldn't close his slack jaw as the headless lichen's legs shook like a leaf before its movement stopped for good. That was when he heard the familiar mechanical beep going off again. Tearing. You've killed an iron-fanged lichen. Level up. My level rose up. To make sure that he didn't mishear that, Jin Woo hurriedly accessed his status window. Name: Song Jin Woo. Level 2. Class: None. Title: None. HP: 205. MP: 22. Tiredness: 0. Stat: Strength: 32. Stamina: 11. Agility: 11. Intelligence: 11. Perception: 11. Available points to distribute: 0. Skills: Passive skills: Unknown, LV Max. Tenacity, LV 1. Active skills: -LV 1. His level really did go up, and when a level went up, a single point was added to all of his stats. As it turned out, it wasn't only the quest rewards that could impact the values of his stats. It was also possible to improve his stats through leveling up, too. To think, I can actually level up. He only carried a vague expectation, but it actually became reality. His heart began to beat faster and faster. On top of that, I get more additional points from leveling up. The stat points he got from the quest rewards were 3. Meanwhile, he got 5 from leveling up once. Although he didn't like the fact that he couldn't freely distribute those points the way he liked to, but still his growth through leveling up was much greater. Also, there was the thing about quests only being available once per day, but there was a good chance that leveling up wouldn't suffer from such restrictions. I only killed 2, but my level rose up. This was the same as in video games. When his level was low, he could raise it up by a lot during a short space of time. And currently, Jin Woo was only a level 2. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was right at the bottom of the pile. However, he was not what one would call a normal low-level player, either. His strength stat already exceeded 30. If the strength stat rose up by 1 point every time one leveled up, then the stat value of Jin Woo's strength was equivalent to level 20 or higher. What if a user possessing level 20's worth of strength stat hunted in the level 1 beginner's hunting area? In other words, explosive leveling up. As if to prove his guess, the destructive might behind that punch easily exceeded his own expectations. The strength stat might have been multiplied by just over 3 times, but the difference in actual physical strength was well beyond that. Jin Woo's original strength value was 10. There was the difference of 3 times the value between the strength stat of 10 and 30, but the difference between the actual forces produced was well beyond that. Could it be? What if, as the stat's value rose up, the weight was also added as well? If that was the case, then such a destructive power output could easily be explained away. Besides that, his movement speed had increased as well. If it was in the past, there was no way Head be able to lightly evade the all-out attack of an animal, nor could his punch move fast enough to produce the sound of the air splitting apart. Right? The physical strength in my muscles has increased, so obviously my speed would have increased along the way too. Simply by raising his strength stat higher, both his power and speed had gone up. The battle against the Lycans proved this. So, what would happen if he increased his agility instead? His curiosity was at its peak, but he didn't have any method to find out at the moment. If he wanted to satisfy his burning curiosity, then he simply had to increase his stats ASAP. Even still, he couldn't help but think that investing points he got as quest rewards in the agility stat kind of felt a bit wasteful. If he shored up his strength stat, both his power and speed would go up anyway. So what was the point of investing in the agility stat? Since his thoughts were as such, there was only one way to go forward here. I gotta level up lots of times, really fast. Indeed, Head raised the agility stat through leveling up. Every little cent saved would eventually net him a buck later down the line. If he increased the values 1 point at a time, Head feel the difference sooner or later. Jin Woo pried, loosed the sword off the ground. In that case, shall I get started for real then? There was one more monster he needed to kill, after all. By the way, where did it disappear to? The Lycan that was definitely somewhere nearby had gone with the wind before he had noticed it. Jin Woo hurriedly scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find a single trace of the creature. Quite likely, it had turned tail and ran away while he was immersed in the status windows. Well, he should have known something was up when it lowered its tail and cautiously studied his mood. TSK. Jin Woo smacked his lips, realizing that a bundle of experience points had just escaped from his grasp. Hang on, do these things give away things like magic crystals too? The sudden thought popping up in his head stopped him in his tracks. Monsters appearing within the gates all possessed one, or sometimes several, magic crystals in them. If one got lucky, a runestone might drop too. Magic crystals could be used for a variety of purposes, and they alone exchanged hands for princely sums. No need to even mention the runestones, which could be used by hunters to learn brand new skills. It was not an exaggeration to say that the reasons why hunters participated in raids was not just because of the promised payment from the related organizations, but also these magic crystals as well. Jin Woo was also a hunter. He was successful in killing these monsters, so not being rewarded for his work kind of felt a bit like he was wrong somehow. Feeling a little rueful, he sliced open the Lycan's stomach, but it turned out to be a waste of time. It seemed that these creatures were fundamentally different from the regular monsters. The thing was, he had entered quite a few different dungeons in his career so far, but he had never seen these wolf-like monsters before. Jin Woo dusted his hands and was about to stand back up, but then, he spotted something glittering within the dead Lycan's mouth. So, he opened the creature's maws. One of the Lycan's fangs was emitting a beam of light. When Jin Woo reached out, a new message popped up before him. You found the item, the canine of a Lycan. Take it. Sure thing. Item, the canine of a Lycan. Rarity, none. Type, miscellaneous. A large and sharp canine of a Lycan. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Jin Woo got flustered a bit while staring at the canine tooth. There was a store too? Where would you find a system less friendly than the one he was saddled with? To think, it was designed in such a way that the end user had to personally experience it with his own body before learning about any of its functions. Hell, he wasn't given much of an explanation during the penalty quest, and he almost died as a result back then. Jin Woo gnashed his teeth and tried to summon this store thing. Store. He couldn't help but feel his anticipation build up, wondering if a shop with a signboard declaring store and manned by an NPC merchant, kind of like for video games, might really appear before him. However, what appeared instead was a bunch of green letters floating in the air like hologram projections, just like when he accessed his mailbox. And there were only 2 words there, too. Buy and sell. What a simple-tastic store this was. Jin Woo selected buy. He didn't have a single cent in his pockets, but he was still curious about the stuff available within the store. Unfortunately for him, the store turned out to be one cold customer. Your level is too low to access the buy function. He was already familiar with the cold shoulder treatment from the places that required him to pay up, so this was fine. Sure, sure. Jinwoo didn't think too much about it and shifted his gaze away to sell. Will you sell item? The canine of a Leakin? Yup. With the clinging sounds of coins, his inventory appeared next. Right at the bottom of the display, in the column saying gold, he could see the number 20 appearing there. That space had been empty yesterday. 20 gold, He couldn't really use that money in real life. And he couldn't even use the store properly yet, so he had no idea just how much this 20 gold was actually worth. Oh well, a creature from the rank E dungeon wouldn't have given me any decent loot to begin with. Even if there was a difference between the dungeons found beyond the gates and this so-called instant dungeon, it would be the same difference at the end of the day. Still, Jinwoo wanted to make sure, so he was about to collect the canine from the other dead Leakin, but he ended up doing a facepalm instead. I blew away its entire head, didn't I? Jinwoo felt bitter as he turned around to go somewhere else. 20 gold and its unknown worth were calling back to him, but he couldn't waste time searching for a single canine that could have flown to pretty much anywhere under this dim lighting. However, as soon as he turned around, the feelings of bitterness dissipated in an instant. Growl! Grr! Grr! Well now, the Leakin he thought had ran away actually came back with a bunch of its friends. A wonderfully bright smile bloomed on Jinwoo's face. Even at a casual glance, there must be over 20 of them here. Eureka! Hang on a minute. Was that the right word to use in this sort of situation? Whatever. It was definitely a word to express one's joy. Anyway, Jinwoo tightly grasped the sword and spoke up. With the exception of your canines, I'm gonna massacre all of you. When the chilling glare of a man who was obsessed about making money landed on the Lycans, they became intimidated and shuddered slightly. It was at this point that Jinwoo pounced on them without mercy. Level up. Most uptod / and vels a / republished on Enro velbjot c/o/m. As he expected, his levels rose up quite quickly. Simply from searching every nook and cranny of the first floor and killing all the Lycans he could find, Jinwoo's level shot right up to 7. He had jumped up 5 flights of stairs, in other words. Whimper. Well, he caught up and killed the very last monster running desperately away from him. A strange message popped up into his view. You have acquired the title, Slaughterer of Wolves. A title? Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. A title given to a hunter skilled in hunting wolves. When facing animal-type monsters, all of your stats will increase by 40%. TL, the hunter is a lowercase here because that's what's in the raw. The hunters until now had been written in English, actually. When he opened his status window to take a look, the title column indeed had been updated. Level 7. Title, Slaughterer of Wolves. HP 766. MP 81. Tiredness 3. Strength 37. Stamina 16. Agility 16. Intelligence 16. Perception 16. A bonus boost to his stats when fighting against animal-type monsters. Although the effect was a bit restricted, still, having his stats increase by 40%, now that didn't sound too bad at all. There are plenty of animal-type monsters out there, so would this apply to them as well? TL. The author had been using the Hanja word for monsters to describe those found in the Gates dungeons until now, but the creatures found in the instant dungeon are written in the English word, monster. That's why we get this line. If that was the case, then he'd be able to easily kill monsters when participating in the future raids. However, he still earned big time even when disregarding his new title. 34 wolf canines, 2 rusted daggers, a set of traveler's clothes, and 1 return crystal. While killing these wolves, he learned that he could sometimes find loot from their bellies. Of course, none of them was all that useful. The rusted daggers possessed lower attack power bonus compared to the sword he'd been using until now, and the traveler's clothes were not something he could actually wear, but just some random japdom, vendor trash, essentially, that he could hawk off to the store. When he sold them all off, he earned just over 1,000 gold. Current gold, 1,060. Even then, I can't really celebrate, can I? Well, no matter how much he hoarded this gold thing, he couldn't use them anyways. At least not for now. The only thing remaining, besides the gold, was the return crystal. When he was trying desperately to escape from the dungeon back then, the message said he'd need a return crystal if he wanted to leave. And now, if he wanted to, he could escape at any time. He found himself on a crossroads. In front, the stairs leading down to the second floor. And in his hand, a single return crystal grasped tightly. Do I continue on, or do I back out? If it was in the past, he'd not hesitate and choose the latter. That was how he managed to survive all those raids with his pathetic stats. Everyone said that him surviving until now was a miracle, but well, he was trying to be smart about his choices. Actually, however, the story was different now. He didn't want to retreat here. He felt that, if he turned away to leave now, then he'd never be able to take another step forward in his life. I've retreated enough times already, right? Wouldn't it be okay for him to jump in headlong, at least once in his life? Jinwoo pocketed the return crystal. His steps climbing down the steps to the second floor was light. Unlike the dungeons of the gates, there was a thing called respawn within the instant dungeon. While he was sweeping away every single monster found on the second floor, all the monsters on the first respawned. While he went back upstairs to deal with them, monsters on the second floor respawned. So on and so forth. Jinwoo hopped between the first and second floor and killed monsters until his level no longer rose up. Who knows when he'll ever run into another opportunity like this one. Along the way, he got so used to this place that he was able to predict from where and how the monsters would try to attack him. A monkey falling from the ceiling. He lightly evaded the claws of the monkey-type monster falling from the ceiling and stabbed it in the chest with his sword. And then, Ki-Yek, 0.1 cat each from left and right. And then, he orderly sliced the necks of the Black Panther-like creatures jumping at him from his sides. Kayak, Kakak, you've killed a Blade Claw Briga. You've killed a Black Shadow Raisin. And with these three, he had arrived at the end of the second floor. He had cleared out the second floor once more. However, his level hadn't been moving from 15 for a long time now. It seemed that reaching that high was the limit for the first two floors. Stats. Stat. Strength, 45. Stamina, 24. Agility, 24. Intelligence, 24. Perception, 24. Available points to distribute, 0. With him being level 15, his stats had risen up by quite a lot. His agility was now almost at 25. He finally got to feel the difference between the agility and the strength stat when the former hit the value of 20. The agility did not increase his speed, but rather it was as if the opponent's movement had become far slower in his perception instead. Exactly like watching a slow-motion video. The scenes of the monkey falling from the ceiling and panthers pouncing on him played out in slow motion. Should he describe it as him being able to manipulate the time flow as he wished? It became easier to evade enemies' attacks, and it also became easier to hit them as well. As the word implied, he had indeed become more agile. The so-called speed was wholly dependent on who was looking at it. The higher his agility stat, the bigger the difference between him and his enemies would become. From their perspective, he'd look as if he was moving at an unbelievably quick speed. If both the strength and agility increase concurrently, their synergy should be pretty incredible. That was his final assessment of the agility stat. Besides all that, Jinwoo shifted his gaze away. What should I do now? He was looking at the stairs leading down to the third floor. There was a reason why he continued to hunt in the first two floors, even though there was a way to go even lower. It's giving me the creeps. With his perception stats so much higher, he could sense the aura of something ominous lurking down there far better than before. Without a doubt, something really strong was hiding somewhere down below. He didn't have to see it to know. Jinwoo recalled the message he saw back by the entrance of this instant dungeon. You cannot exit the dungeon. Please defeat the boss first or find a return crystal. The existence of the boss. Jinwoo had been roaming the first two floors in order to raise his levels until he couldn't anymore, all for the purpose of fighting this boss. He had prepared himself as much as he could, but when the time to actually go down there came, he was getting all sweaty and nervous. Jinwoo lightly slapped both of his cheeks. I mean, I've entered a dungeon, so I can't just leave without taking a look at what this boss looks like now, can I? A certain amount of tension was a must in order to maintain the peak condition, and this amount was just about right for him. Jinwoo gripped the sword tightly with both of his hands, slowly descended the steps. Could he have been mistaken when the steps felt unusually longer than before? He swallowed dried saliva down. The lighting was worse than the first 2 floors, but there was no problem with seeing where he was going. Is it because of my perception stat? He couldn't help but feel that his eyesight had improved greatly. He cautiously climbed lower until eventually spotting the railway tunnel used by the subway trains. No, he saw where the railway used to be. The tunnel that should have been used by trains was now filled with jet black liquid instead. What is this? Rather than a subway tunnel, it was more like a lake or a river now. Just as Jinwoo took one more step forward to take a closer look, a long log-like object shot out from the surface of the black water. Swish! It's fast. The thing that arrived in front of his nose in the blink of an eye was not a log, but a snake with a thickness rivaling one. Actually, taken by surprise, Jinwoo could only swing the sword and strike the head of the snake away from him. Clang! Jinwoo's eyes opened wider. What the hell? He did succeed in deviating that direction of the lunging snake, but his trusty steel longsword ended up breaking apart from the impact. Jinwoo looked back in surprise. The snake must have been surprised by his counterattack as well, because it didn't try to follow up right away, but instead chose to simply glare at him while coiling itself up a distance away. The ruler of the swamp, poison-fanged blue Kasaka. Jinwoo could clearly see the orange-colored name of the monster. It was a creature incomparably faster and hardier than those with their names written in white. Even then, for a sword reinforced with magic energy to break like that. Jinwoo swallowed nervously and cautiously studied the boss monster called Kasaka. Blue scales covering its entire body gleamed in an oily manner, as if it had draped itself with thick armor. Those scales had no gaps to speak of. Sword strikes wouldn't have worked in the first place. It'd be the same story for punches, too. When Jinwoo's thoughts arrived there, the Kasaka must finished its own analysis on its prey, because it finally lunged at him once more. No matter how one looked at it, it was a frightening turn of speed, that's for sure. Swaiwish. Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. It's coming. When he concentrated hard, he could now clearly see the attack of the Kasaka, which was something he couldn't even properly decipher in the beginning. This was all due to the increased agility stat. Just before the Kasaka opened its maws wide and tried to swallow him, Jinwoo swiftly sidestepped and let the attack brush past him. At the same time, he wrapped his arms around the creature and caught it in a headlock. He then tightened his grip. SFX for bones breaking. Jinwoo's strength stat was almost at 50. An unbelievably powerful pressure tightened around the snake's main artery. The snake could not escape from his grip and thrashed around as if it was in pain. Jinwoo gritted his teeth and strengthened his arms even more. Slam! Boom! Jinwoo's body slammed against the walls and on the floor, but he never released his arms. If I didn't raise my levels as high as I could before coming here, there was literally no end to wondering about what-ifs and what could have beens. However, all kinds of thoughts still swirled in Jinwoo's head. If he didn't raise his level to the limit, if his strength stat wasn't so illogically high, then he'd have gone through incredible hell in order to kill the Kasaka. No, he might even have died here. So, his decision not to come down right away proved to be the smart one. His choice was indeed the right one. Crack! Accompanied by a rather awful noise, the skull of Kasaka gave in and cracked apart. You have killed the ruler of the swamp, poison-fanged blue Kasaka, as expected of a boss mob. His level rose up by 2 after killing the Kasaka. Jinwoo tightly clenched his fists. The level that had been stagnating at 15 had jumped up to 17. In just a single day, he crazily raised his level from 1 all the way up to 17. However, no one hunted boss mobs for experience points. Indeed, if it was a boss mob, then it'd be all about the loot drops. When he started checking out the dead snake, 2 spots of light began gleaming from somewhere within its limp body. 2 items because it was a boss? His expression one of elation. Jinwoo reached out towards the spots of light. Tearing. You have discovered item. Poison Fong of Kasaka. Take it. You have discovered item. Poison Sack of Kasaka. Take it. Take them all. As soon as he said those words, a dagger made out of a bone and a small pouch with liquid in it appeared on his palms. Item. Poison Fong of Kasaka. Rarity, C. Type dagger. Attack plus 25. A dagger fashioned from the poison Fong of the Kasaka. There are traces of the Kasaka's poison on it, so when attacking, it will cause paralysis and bleeding status effects. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Status effect paralysis. The target will be unable to move. Success rate is fixed. Status effect bleeding. The target's stamina will be reduced by 1% per second. Jinwoo nodded his head. A dagger made not out of bone, but from the Fong. Huh. It's not a bad item with those options, yeah? Next up was the pouch. Item. Poison Sack of Kasaka. Rarity, A. Type. Medicine. A pouch containing the refined poison of the Kasaka. Can be found very rarely when hunting Kasakas. Drinking this poison will give you strong skin, but the toxicity will permanently damage your muscles. Affect the iron scales of Kasaka. 20% reduction in physical damage. Side effect, damaged muscles. Strength minus 35. Jinwoo's expression alternated between joy and anguish. The poison Fong of Kasaka was a good weapon to replace the broken longsword. Not only did it possess over twice the attack power, but he really liked the two status effects of paralysis and bleeding, too. However, this poison sack is a bit. Initially, he was really pleased to find an item with the A rarity rating, but when reading the description, he realized this was not something he could feel completely chuffed about. Of course, that effect of reducing all physical damage taken by 20% was a great option befitting an A-rank item. However, it also carried a fatal penalty of decreasing his strength stat by 35, that V/backslash, SSDN0V, L/B, and / for the B/S novel reading expiry, /N/C. It'd be a really painful loss for him, especially when he invested all of his points on increasing his strength stat. Was this the famed double-edged sword, then? No, the expression of chicken ribs suited this item far better, instead. TL, a Korean idiom. It means something like people not giving up on chicken ribs, even though there isn't all that much meat around there. Maybe he might be able to use this thing only when his strength stat had risen so high that the loss of 35 points wouldn't affect him in the slightest, which should be in the distant future. It was impossible to drink it right now. For the time being, I should just hold on to it. With a rueful expression, he stored both inside his inventory. Maybe if an A-rank dagger and a C-rank medicine came out, then he might have felt not as bad as he did now. Well, had have just gotten rid of the C-rank medicine if it was useless, after all. It was then a new message popped up. With the death of the boss, the interior of the dungeon will revert back to its original state. Suddenly, his sights blurred for a bit, and then they were restored back to normal, along with a slight bit of dizziness assaulting his senses. When he took a look around, he found himself inside a normal subway station. The lights overhead shone brightly, and the black liquid filling up the tunnel was all gone, too. But where is everyone? Not just people, but even trains were strangely absent. He even checked the time while thinking that the trains had stopped running for the day because it was so late already, but the clock was indicating 10 p.m. He entered the Hapjeong station around the lunch hour, so he had spent over 9 hours inside that dungeon. I was in there for a long time, wasn't I? If it weren't for his tiredness, stat being refreshed every time he leveled up, had have keeled over from the accumulated fatigue several times by now. Anyway, isn't it still too early for the trains to stop running? Jinwoo tilted his head as not one train showed up, no matter how long he stood there waiting. He decided to leave the station for the time being. While he was trudging towards the exit, he couldn't spot a single person. But as he climbed up the steps to get to the surface, someone shouted at Jinwoo from above. Who goes there? Who knew that the voice of another person would sound this welcoming? Jinwoo quickly raised his head. He saw a soldier wielding a rifle. Who are you? Why are you coming out from there? Haven't you heard the broadcasts? The expression of the soldier was so serious that even Jin Woo's own expression hardened in an instant. Did something happen? What the? How can you even say that? The soldier approached closer, but then he spotted the broken sword in Jin Woo's hand. After it broke, it could no longer be stored in the inventory, and Jin Woo didn't feel like leaving it behind, so he just carried it outside like this. Seeing that, the light within the soldier's eyes changed rapidly. He then carefully studied Jin Woo's current appearance. Now that this soldier had taken a closer look, Jin Woo's clothes displayed various hints of a youth participating in many fierce battles recently. The crumpled expression of the soldier lightened up in an instant. Are you a hunter by any chance?